I would like to, good morning, reconvene our meeting today. And we could start by establishment of a quorum, please.
Dr. Noland. She's going to be a little late this morning. Ms. Bowler.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Dr. Noland, sorry.
Yeah, my bad. I'm here. Thanks.
Ms. Bowler. And I'm sorry, she's going to be a little late this morning. And Dr. Bradbury is absent today. Ms. Laredo.
I'm here.
Ms. Prado.
Here.
Dr. Solicito.
Present.
Ms. Yanis.
Here.
Ms. Yanis.
Sorry.
Oh.
Here. Sorry.
Dr. Nunez?
I was muted.
Dr. Nunez.
Yes, here.
We have a quorum.
Dr. Nolan, how are the horses? All the horses okay?
Well, it's as you can tell, I'm still dressed a little crazy. The fence was down this morning, so we're scrambling. But there's actually was a rainbow this morning, so there's a little bit of sun and a little less rain, and we're surviving. But boy, am I grateful that we haven't lost any and we're hanging in there. So pardon the attire.
Well, Wonder Woman had a lot of different attires for different occasions, so I still think of you as a Wonder Woman. So we left off on agenda item 11B.
Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, members. One moment. Okay, so this shouldn't be take too long. A lot of these concerns were raised at the July and October 2020 meetings, so it shouldn't be anything new. These were just our solutions to address the issues that we've already raised. So the first one is regarding the notice to employer condition. It was unclear whether or not the condition applied to relief veterinarians. It specifically called out employers. So we had situations where individuals who were relief veterinarians and not counting them, they didn't count themselves as employers. They tried to say that this does not apply to them and they do not have to notify anyone that they're on probation because they are contracted veterinarians. And so we made some adjustments to that language in the proposal to clarify that it does apply to relief veterinarians as well. The next one we are dealing with is supervision versus the medical chart review. When you look at the language, it's pretty confusing when we use the term supervision and indirect supervision, especially when indirect supervision is specifically defined in the current regulation. And when anyone sees the title of indirect supervision, they automatically assume that that's a supervisor going in and supervising your work or being readily available, such as what the regulation states. But when you look at it, it really just means a medical record review. And so a medical chart review. And so what we recommend is just breaking them out, having your regular supervision condition that's very clear of what that means. And then you'll have a separate one that just applies to the medical chart review. So we made some recommended changes to break out both conditions. The other section that we have already gone over is just concerns about the language in general. For example, it says it's referring to, it's asking the supervisor to make conclusions and opinions concerning the issues described above and the basis for his or her opinions. But when you read the decisions, especially in stipulated settlements, they're not going to have anything above, any issues described above. In proposed decisions, you know that you have the whole summary of the case in the proposed decision, and then you have the probation conditions after it. But in settlements, you don't. And also when we do accusations, it's if the thought is that they're trying to have them refer to why they were on discipline, we also don't necessarily need them to opine on what has already occurred. We really want to make sure that they are looking at what is currently happening and making sure that what has occurred in the past is not happening currently. So we didn't feel that this was necessary. We also, let's see. So we also are recommending striking the section here. Additionally, the supervisor shall maintain and submit his or her monthly log, designating pays and chart reviews, and dates of service reviewed, and the date upon which the review occurred. The reason we're recommending striking this language is because for BACSPs and for RVTs, that they are not responsible for the medical record. It ultimately falls on the veterinarian, and that's already covered under the medical chart review. And so we recommend striking that language to make it very clear on who's responsible for the medical record at the end of the day. When it comes to medical chart review, we had some concerns that we had mentioned during the last couple meetings regarding the supervisors, and when they're selecting the reports, they weren't the ones actually selecting what medical records to review. Oftentimes it was the probationers who were selecting the reports and then are selecting the records and sending those records off to the supervisor. And oftentimes the supervisors were sending the reports back to the probationer, and the probationer would send it to us. We don't think that this is the intent of this condition. It also is concerning from a probation monitor standpoint. We also had situations where the probationer's medical records were all handwritten and they were incredibly illegible. And so what was happening is that probationer was not only selecting his own records, he would then go type them up himself, send them to the supervisor to then review and send back. And so we had concerns with this, and we worked with legal counsel to put out a clarifying statement to the probationers and to the supervisors of what's required with this condition. So we do think that we need to tweak the language to make it more clear on who is selecting the records, and that the supervisor has to send the records directly to us. So it should not go through the probationer. We also found that the supervising log is inadequate. You had a choice for the 2 supervisor logs, whether it was satisfactory or unsatisfactory. And in most cases, we would receive the satisfactory logs the entire time. And it was very rare that we would ever receive an unsatisfactory log. The concern, though, is when our inspectors went out and we would pull the same records that the supervisors had deemed satisfactory, had an incredible amount of issues. And so when we look at the logs, you can see that it's not really built to make it easy for the supervisor to check off all the requirements that have to go into a medical record. And so we changed the medical record review to reflect more of the requirements in medical records. So you'll see that in one of your attachments. I have an attachment, I believe, let's go back, hold on. So your attachment 2 is your current supervisor review log, and then you can see the proposed medical chart review that we changed. Another thing that we changed on the medical chart review is, let's see, when our inspectors went out, they found it really challenging to identify some of the patient records because they would put their animal name and date of birth, but there's no unique identifier. And so if it was a generic fluffy, and they might have multiple fluffies, and date of birth is hard, not always reliable. So when our inspectors would ask for those reports, they found it very challenging sometimes because staff was still not able to provide those records to the inspectors. So, and on the new record review that we did, the chart review, it has the unique identifiers there, and that way the inspectors will be able to easily identify what records that we want to review. We also had concerns about the volume of charts that we were requiring to be audited. We had discussed this again in prior meetings, and we recommend making it more down to 10% or at least 15 patient medical records. We just don't see the need to make it that significant. That's a pretty high audit rate, even if you're at the lowest level. And so we feel that the 10% or a specific number is enough to give us an idea if there's something wrong. Because if there's something wrong, then we can go out with our inspectors and investigate further. We just didn't feel that it was necessary for the supervisor to have to review this many medical records per month. We also are recommending a change to the schedule of when we receive reports. Currently, the supervisors are required to submit monthly reports. We don't feel this is necessary, and it's also not something that the board staff can maintain. We just roughly broke it down. It equates to roughly 1,080 to 1,200 reports being sent to the board each year. And we feel that the same thing can be accomplished as far as reviewing compliance with this condition if we decrease the amount to the quarterly, and that way it'll match what the quarterly probation reports that the probationers are already sending in. And so once we get our probation technician, which we're doing interviews right now, that probation technician is still going to be the one responsible for reviewing those and coding them into our system. It will just cut down a lot on the workload and we'll be able to maintain it. But we do feel that even if they're submitted quarterly, we'll still be able to identify if there's any continuing concerns and be able to address those quickly. So with that, we do request a motion. So members, this regulatory proposal, it did go out for a 45-day public comment period. We didn't receive any public comments for that. And so it could have progressed through the process, but we really felt that these changes were necessary to fix now. And so we're requesting that it goes out for another 15-day public comment period, and then we can continue on to the process. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board members if you have any questions or concerns.
This was a collaboration with everyone on the enforcement team. Is that correct?
Yeah, mostly with Ginger, our awesome probation monitor. She was the one who identified a lot of these concerns. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were adequately addressing the concerns as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with the changes that have been made. I was thinking to myself that I'm going to have a special fountain pen commissioned for Ginger. I'm going to call it the probationer. That's going to be the name of the pin, because it seems remarkable where it was and the changes that we've made, especially with the probationer being the one to choose the medical records to be evaluated, seemed audacious. And this new medical record review is beautiful. I assume that it can easily go into Breeze and all that stuff, and it's quite good. So congratulations. The only question I had was, I do understand the need to decrease the amount of work that staff is doing, and I agree with taking it down to quarterly reports as opposed to monthly reports. But are you proposing changing, when you talk about the number of cases that need to be reviewed, eliminating that substantial, moderate, partial to just 10% off the board, no matter what?
I am. I recommend that. But what I want to clarify here too, here's the language. So it's a minimum of 10% of respondents' animal patient records or 15 medical records, whichever is greater. And we put that there because sometimes you have less, you have some probationers who aren't being as well, they're not as busy, as not even amount of patients. But you see here, it is a minimum of 12 times per year. And so they're still doing monthly reviews of these medical records. They're just not required to submit their paperwork until quarterly.
Right.
If that makes sense.
I mean, I remember when the disciplinary guidelines were first written, we put those different tiers in because we felt that some probationers just need to be monitored more closely than others. And that would give the board the option to determine which level of what number of charges need to be reviewed. And it was kind of left up to the board staff to determine that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall at any meetings that we had, we said this person needs to have 75% or 50% or 25%. We just kind of left it to the staff. And has the staff ever done 75% or 50 or 25%, or what have they been doing?
No, to my knowledge, they're all starting out as 25%. And that's still, when you look at the numbers, that's still a significant amount of medical records. But one thing I want to point out is it's not taking the board's ability away to look further into more medical records. What it's going to do is it gives us a snapshot of what the supervisor is looking at and evaluating. And then when our inspectors go out just to do a double check, we can compare. And if we see that there are still some concerns like we are seeing now, we can then take additional action and let the probationer know that they're out of compliance and go on that route. So we're still being able to accomplish that, just in, I guess, less resources.
Okay, I was a little bit concerned about it, but I was reassured with number one, the commissioner is not the one choosing which records are being reviewed. That's reassuring. And number two, the supervisor, if that's still the term we're going to use, it's easy to check satisfactory or unsatisfactory, but now that we're asking them to do more, it probably makes sense to reduce the number that have to do. So I'm happy.
Great.
I just want to say kudos to Ginger. That was kind of shocking to read, that people could submit their own records when they're supposed to be the ones on probation. Do we know how long that was going on for?
Ginger, I don't know if you know. I just know when I started, it had seemed to have been going on for a long time. Ginger, do you have any additional information on that?
Yeah, I think it's been a while. Maybe since, I mean, I've been here years, and it was happening before that. And I think it's a duration of how short people were here that it probably has been going on for a long time. Because, I mean, the only reason I catch that stuff is I had 13 years with the Human Medical Board. So, you know, that experience, that really counts.
Well, thank you, Ginger. I really appreciate you catching that, because I think that's critical to making sure people stay accountable, that somebody else is submitting these records. I mean, that just doesn't happen anywhere if you're on probation. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. But really, Jessica has really made it happen. So
thank you both. I appreciate you catching that loophole. That's great.
Ginger, what do you say that we just put everyone back on probation? And start fresh.
sounds good.
We can't do that.
Oh, what a fun sucker.
So I have a quick question for Ginger as well, if I can. Ginger, do you foresee this? It sounds like the actual supervisor is going to have to. There's some feedback. I don't think it's me. Yeah. So do you think that right now the actual supervisors are going to the practice of the probationer, or are they just relying on the probationer to send them records?
I think it's the latter, Doctor. And you know, the ugly truth is, even if someone were to go to the practice, the physician can still steer them in a particular direction. You know, at the Human Medical Board, you know, when you go see your doctor, you put a sign-in sheet, and you sign in and you wait. Typically, they would, the physician would look at that sign-in sheet and then say, okay, I want the records for this person, and this person, and that was really how to do it randomly. And so that's kind of an ideal way we want folks to report basically every patient they saw, and then the supervisor to pick what charts they want to review.
But unfortunately, if the supervisor is not there when the probationer is seeing clients, it's going to be tough. So I can't think of any creative way to overcome that.
Well, Doctor, luckily with this board, we have an inspection team, and so we really can pull just surprise visits on the folks. It would be nice if our supervising veterinarians could do surprise visits, and you know, that's something that we can talk about. maybe getting that to happen.
Okay, yeah, just the knowledge that that could happen might help.
Right. Yes, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Good job, Ginger and Jessica.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, sometimes just the thought of it happening can scare people into doing the right thing. I totally agree, Jamie.
Well, after Zoom meetings, there's going to be holographic meetings, and so it'll be a surprise holographic appearance of an inspector. And that'll be completely safe. So this is currently going back to the 15-day period. So do we need to do anything? Or
Yeah, so if the board approves the recommended changes, then we would need a motion, and I believe the language is written for you. I'm sorry, I'm scrolling back up. So we would need someone to make this motion here.
I'll make the motion.
Would you mind reading the motion, or would you like me to read it for you?
I can read it. I make the motion that the action requested, correct? Yes, okay.
Yes.
That if the board determines the proposed modifications to the rulemaking text are necessary, please entertain a motion to approve the proposed modifications to the text for a 15-day comment period. And if there are no adverse comments received during that 15-day public comment period, delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed regulatory changes as modified, and delegate the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file.
I think your motion should start with motion to approve instead of if the board determines, right? So I think that's what you meant. Motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it. I think it was clear enough. I second.
Motion and then second to approve these changes. And I really do want to get the probationer fountain pen to put these into effect. Is there any more discussion from the board? Hearing none, moderator, could you open up for discussion from the audience?
Thank you. This is the moderator. Members of the public, I am opening up the Q&A at this moment. And I'm going to go over the instructions in a little bit more detail the first time right now, and then afterwards I'll go through it just briefly. So members of the public, you can indicate that you would like to make a comment by clicking on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. These instructions will be shared on the screen each time for your reference. In the Ask field, typically in the lower right of the WebEx screen, members of the public who wish to make a comment will type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. Any other communication will not be responded to. Members of the public, it is not necessary to identify yourself in order to make a public comment. We will be calling on the requests in the order that they are received. We will call on you and mute your microphone, and afterwards we will move on to the next individual who has a request. Please note that the Q&A feature is being used only as a means for the members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once unmuted, the member of the public may verbally state their comments. This is not a means to ask questions of the moderator of the board. Such inquiries submitted using this feature will not be responded to. If any attendees utilize profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. Or you are free to express criticism for the sake of the members of the public participating on the call. Please do not use profane language when making comments to the public. Thank you. I do have an individual identified as Bonnie Lutz. Bonnie, I will unmute you now. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here today. I do have a question, even though I was just told I can't ask a question, but I assume that this is going to be retroactive for all people that are on probation. And therefore, there will be some kind of a notification sent out to all those people. I would ask that perhaps I could be copied on that notification so that I can participate in making sure that the people that I have represented that are on probation follow these rules, because I know when the letter went out about who was choosing the records, there was so much confusion. I don't know why there was confusion. It seemed pretty clear to me. But, everybody thought that it was pointed directly to them and what had they done wrong, and they were all freaking out. So, it would be great if I could be part of the process, assuming that this is retroactive. Thank you.
So Dr. News, if you wouldn't mind, I would just like to clarify in response to that. So there's no changes that as far as the specific conditions that are going to be made to probationers that are already on probation. However, the clarifications that we sent out about how it's currently happening, we can send those out because we're not changing any of the conditions. We're just clarifying what those conditions mean. But we're not going to, for those who already have the supervisor condition that includes the indirect and indirect, we can't go back and make our changes here retroactive. So it depends on what we're able to do, but in any case where it's a clarification issue, we will definitely include Ms. Lutz in those communications so she's aware and can help her clients come into compliance.
This is the moderator. No further requests have been submitted, and I'd just like to make a clarification in the instructions. By not asking questions that's meant within the Q&A portion, you are feel free to ask questions and make your comments to the board. And Dr. Nunez, no further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Any further comments from members of the board? Jessica, please call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler. She is still absent. Ms. Laredo.
Yes.
Ms. Prado.
Yes.
Dr. Solicito.
Yes.
Ms. Yanes.
Yes.
Dr. Noland.
Yes.
Dr. Nunez.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Agenda item 11D, CCR regarding board fees.
Yes, and that will be me. So item 11D, this regulatory item is before the board today for members to consider and approve proposed. Actually, if I could share my screen, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Okay, so the item is before members today to consider and approve proposed responses to comments received during the 45-day public comment period, which ended on November 9th, and during the public hearing, which was held on November 10th. This item pertains to the board's fee schedule certificate of compliance rulemaking package, which corresponds with the emergency regulations that the board filed last January. As you know, that action was necessary and resulted in raising application, license, and registration fees to their statutory caps under CCR sections 2070 and 2071. And as you may also know, as a follow-up to an emergency action, an agency is required to subsequently file a regular rulemaking package with the Office of Administrative Law. And once that certificate of compliance package is approved, the regulatory changes would become permanent at that point. So the 45-day comment period for this item commenced on September 25th, and as I mentioned, concluded on November 9th. During that time, we received 2 requests for public comment. For public hearing. So the hearing was held on November 10th. Also, around that time in November, as Karen Halbo mentioned yesterday, OAL had recommended that the board pursue a readoption of the emergency regulations. And that essentially extends the effectiveness of the emergency regulations and gives the board additional time to complete the certificate of compliance process. We filed that readoption request for readoption in November. On November 12th, it was approved by OAL on November 18th, and that extended our deadline for the certificate of compliance package, it's giving us until June 25th to complete the process here. So during the 45-day public comment period, the board received over 50 comments. They are provided to you under this agenda item as an attachment. The comments included objections, concerns, recommendations regarding the proposed regulations or the fee increases. And in response to that, we have, with the assistance of Regulatory Counsel and Board Counsel, prepared proposed responses for your consideration. Those responses will be included in the final statement of reasons and the final rulemaking package. I will note that due to the number of comments, we have categorized them and summarized those categories of comments, and then have provided a corresponding proposed response for your consideration. And before I get into the details of the comments, I will just quickly summarize kind of the range of comments received. They range from statements indicating that the board has not been proactive with regard to its budget or management of funds. There have been questions asking why another fee increase was required when one took place in 2018 or 2019. There have been statements indicating that increased fees will result in less renewals and thus less revenue for the board. There have been statements, as we know, indicating that too much of the burden has been placed on RVTs. There have been statements indicating that fee increases will create a barrier to licensure. Statements indicating that a shortage of RVTs could result in the hiring of unlicensed technicians or unlicensed activity. Statements indicating that the fee increases will contribute to decreased availability of quality services. There have been statements indicating that RVT funds fees should not subsidize other board programs or services, and also statements asking us to take into consideration the current state of affairs and the current economic climate. So that's just kind of a quick summary of the range of comments that we received.
Justin, I'm going to jump in real fast and just provide a clarification too. So while it says that we only receive, we're responding to the 57 comments received in the 45-day public comment period. One thing I want to note that during the initial 5-day public comment period for the emergency fees, that public comment period was specifically for people objecting to the process, whether or not we have the authority to do emergency or whether or not it qualified as an emergency rulemaking. During that 5-day public comment period, we received over 550 comments. And so when you look at the amount that we received in a 45-day, it's significantly lower. And so we think that that happened because there was a lot of confusion to the public of when to submit their comments. So based on that, I just want to reassure everybody that these responses, Justin and I both went through the 550 plus comments received during the 5-day public comment period, and we feel that they are still adequately covered in all of these broken out sections. So there was nothing that was really different from the 550 versus the 57 that we received in the 45-day public comment period. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, thank you. And we even took a step further because when we did the readoption, that opened up another 5-day comment period as well. So between Jessica and myself, we have looked at probably over 600 comments. So we wanted to make sure that these responses address everything that we've received to date. So that is what you are seeing here. So before I begin, there's 24 responses here. So if it's the board's preference to go through these individually, we can go through each individual comment and the proposed responses. Or if you feel that you've had the opportunity to adequately review them, we could perhaps just only go through the ones that you have questions on or suggestions. Before I proceed, I just wanted to pose that question to the board.
I went through all those points, and I'm comfortable with not necessarily going through all of them. But if any other board members have a difference of opinion, let me know. But there's a lot of overlap between the responses.
Yes, that's a good point, Dr. Nunez. There is some overlap, so I didn't want to take more time than might be necessary. So, but happy to go about this however you prefer.
Okay. You know, the first thing I'd like to say is that you have to love the language of regulation. On November 4th, the board issued a notice of intent to readopt emergency regulations and an update finding of emergency, which, as everyone knows, that's going to allow us, readoption extends the effective date of emergency regulations by 90 days, plus 2 additional 60-day extensions are provided per the governor's executive orders, giving the board additional time to finalize and submit the certificate of compliance package. I mean, just wow, how government works is pretty impressive. I thought that was funny. And then just the responses that you gave to the questions were appropriate. I'd like to say just a couple of things. The accusation that the board does not pay attention to its budget is truly not false. I mean, it's very impressive to me. I think that every day Jessica thinks about the budget, and every day seems to be more and more budgetary challenges on how to make it work. So the budget is foremost on probably every staff member of the board. I have every confidence in that. I do understand, you know, historically, oh my God, the board's raising fees again, and the board only raises fees to make it more difficult for us with inspections and standards of care and so forth. But you know, the board, I'm proud of being a veterinarian. I'm proud of the veterinary profession, and I'm proud that we have a regulatory body that just ensures that we offer the best care to our patients in the world, in my opinion. And so I think that the need for a regulatory body to make sure we do the best we can is appropriate. And to achieve that goal, we need funding. That's the fees. The other thing I would add to that is that if you had one wish, as I left the board, which is going to be soon, I'm going to leave you all, that more people understood that the things that we do are not meant to be punitive or disciplinary, but more rehabilitative and just help us be a better profession. That's why we have fees, and that's why we have a board. Also, there was a lot of comments that were made about the increased fees impacting the RVTs. We're very much aware of that, and if, as you can see, for many areas of these last 2 days, the RVT registrations have been thoroughly taken into consideration, and things have been done to try to reduce them. So that's all I have to say. Good job on the responses.
I actually have a comment as well. I know everybody knows where I stand on the issue of the fees with RVTs, but I want to thank Justin for putting this together. This was very well organized, and I want to make sure that everybody's paying attention to the comments that were raised, because I agree with Dr. Nunez. We need this regulatory body, which is the only reason I went along with this. It was pointed out by several of the comments that the fees for RVTs are higher than that of a registered nurse, even though the salary for RVTs is only a fraction of that for a registered nurse. They had the fees listed by state, and California does charge the highest fees in the country. And there were a lot of personal stories of RVTs who could not continue with their licensure. They may have been few and far between, but I do want to make sure that we're all paying attention to that, because as we were discussing in the issues with access, it's very hard to grasp the magnitude of these issues if you're not experiencing it daily. So if you are an amazing veterinarian who pays for your RVT's licensing fees, you may not understand that there are several non-corporate mom and pop veterinary hospitals out there who don't do that, and several RVTs who do have to pay for it themselves. So I could easily go out and find 20 people to support my viewpoints, just as somebody on the opposite side could do that. But I think that these comments were very well put together, and I want to make sure that we are aware of that, because again, we do need this regulatory body, but I still believe there are other outside factors that contributed to the need for the fee increases, and this may have been the most the quickest way to put a Band-Aid on the issue, but the RVTs are being impacted. So I want to make sure that we did pay attention to each and every one of those comments.
Any other board member comments?
All right, does anyone want to make a motion to approve these responses from the 45-day public hearing?
This is Jamie Mark. I'd be happy to make a motion. I did want to make a mention that I do recall when we went to the last in-person VSB meeting, there were several regulatory boards that mentioned that the state still supported their board to some extent, if not all the way. And California, quite a while ago, created their regulatory boards to be standalone, fee-based or fee income-based. So I think there is a real discrepancy across the nation in who supports the budgets of boards, regulatory boards. That may be changing, and that was several years ago, so I don't know where we stand nationally now in relation to other states. But anyway, yes, I would be happy to make a motion to approve the proposed responses to comments received during the 45-day public comment period and during the public hearing, and direct staff to incorporate the responses into the FSR and proceed with the final rulemaking, which is the certificate of compliance package.
What a wonderful motion you made. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any other comments from the board? Hearing none, moderator, could you open up the public comment, please?
This is the moderator. At the request from the board, I'll be opening up the Q&A. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. And just a friendly reminder to staff and board members who are not speaking to please mute their microphone just to avoid that echoing sound in the background. Thank you. I have an individual identified as Nancy Ehrlich. I apologize if I mispronounced her last name. Nancy, I'll be unmuting you at this moment. And actually, I cannot unmute your microphone. Feel free to type in the comment in the Q&A box and I can read it out loud for you. And Nancy's comment is, "I would like an explanation of where the VMB is going with the VACSP."
So I can answer that. For the VCSPs, there was a concern in several of the comments that the board was not raising the VCSP fees to their statutory cap, because you see that the application fee in regulation is $50 and the registration fee is $50. And so when you look at the statute, it says the statutory cap at $100. However, we cannot go over that total for $100 statute. So when the board did the regulation, they broke it up to 50 and 50. And so because that equates to the statutory cap right now, that's why we could not raise the VACSPs through this rulemaking package. However, the board is requesting through sunset that all of the statutory caps be increased, just similar to the range that was prior to the increase. You have a minimum and you have a maximum, and then the board throughout the years could pursue rulemaking to increase it as needed. And so I anticipate the board doing something very similar to where you have another minimum and you have another maximum, and then you would be able to raise the VACSP cap just like you would with the other fees.
This is the moderator. And Nancy followed up with, can you raise the VACSP fee through sunset?
Yes, and so in April, when we were presenting the MDC's recommendations for the options that you guys briefly saw on Thursday, the staff was also going to propose the ranges and to raise the cap as well, just as the board has previously discussed. And so at that time, the board can raise those fees as well.
This is the moderator. No further requests have come through. I'm actually an additional response from Nancy, not just the cap, but the actual fee.
Yeah, so that would be an option for the board to do. In order to raise the fee, you would essentially set a new minimum. So if you wanted to go above that $100, then the board, through similar to what we're doing for the minimum for veterinarians and the premises registrations, you set a minimum higher than what the regulation allows, then that statute, the new one, would supersede the regulation. So then the minimum set in statute would be the one that automatically takes effect, just like the premises registration fees and the veterinarian registration fees that we're hoping to get in the sunset bill.
And Nancy says, thank you. I do have another individual identified as Anita Levy-Hudson. I wanted to double check if I can unmute your microphone so you can be able to make your comment. Anita, I've unmuted your microphone.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, as always, to allow public to comment on these issues. It is much appreciated, and I am glad to hear that you are recognizing the sort of plight of the RVTs in the amount of money that it costs to remain licensed and working. Obviously, this is not the direction that we want to be at the moment, but I definitely did want to say thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the process and respond. And that's really all I had right now.
Thank you. No further requests have come through. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Actually, Nancy kind of reminded me, there was a statement that said that the VACSP program was costing more than expected. And the response was in regards to the limits that we can raise fees on. But was that initial statement true? Is it costing more than expected?
I don't know about that specific statement. I do know that when the VACSP was created, there was an estimate on how much revenue was going to be brought in, both with the initial and the renewals. So it's a little difficult for me to fully explain why they thought that so much was going to come in. But what I can say from the data is that the nature of this permit, it's not as, the permit is not as permanent as a veterinary license or an RVT. It's more like we're seeing like a receptionist as far as the permit holders that come and go from clinic to clinic. And so what's happening is a lot of those permit holders are not renewing because they have left the profession or they went somewhere else. And so there's not nearly as much revenue coming in. We also know that based on the data, there's a lot more convictions that come in for those individuals. And so it takes a lot more time to investigate the convictions before deciding whether or not to grant or deny the permit. So that could be what she's referring to.
Okay, yeah, I understand that the revenue is somewhat unpredictable because of the point you just made. I know there was a lot of question about the cost of the fingerprinting part, but again, as explained in my responses, all that goes to the FBI, all those fees and so forth. But I had never heard that it costs more than expected. But maybe your thoughts on it's a little bit disquieting that there's a lot more convictions than we thought there would be, but maybe that's an explanation for that. But it's hard to say if you really don't know how good idea of revenue. But that's all I have to say. Any other questions from the board? All right, Jessica, could you call for the vote?
Ms. Bowler? She is still absent. Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Yanis?
I'm only doing this for you, Jennifer. Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
You're not doing it for me, Alana? My answer is yes.
Motion carries.
Agenda item 11E. The wonderful other drug compound.
Okay, and if I could be able to share my screen again, that would be great. And I did want to mention that Jessica deserves most of the credit for those responses to the last item, so wanted to make sure that was acknowledged. Okay. Give me just one moment. Okay, so we're on agenda item 11E. Okay, so this item is before the board today for members to consider and approve proposed responses to written comments and recommendations received during the 15-day public comment period. This was in response to modified regulatory text, which was approved by the board in October and then noticed to the public in November. So again, this pertains to the board's drug compounding regulatory proposal, which you have seen probably about 3 times over the last year. But most recently at our last meeting in October, the board approved responses to comments and recommendations received by the Animal Health Institute that were received during the 45-day public comment period. And also at that time, the board approved modified text to resolve concerns raised by AHI. As I mentioned, the modified text was noticed on November 19th for 15 days. The comment period ended on December 4th. During that time, we only received 1 comment. And again, that comment was received from AHI. So in response to that most recent comment, we are not recommending additional modifications to the text today. We are just presenting the comments and recommendations to you and the board's proposed responses or responses for your consideration today. Those will be, once approved, incorporated into the final statement of reasons and the final rulemaking package. So I will jump over to page 2 of the memo. The comments were kind of broken down into 2 parts. So the first comment here indicates that AHI asserts that the use of bulk substances should be a last resort and recommends the use of bulk substances should conform to a list of approved bulk substances that may be included in the final federal guidance. Okay, that's the first comment or recommendation. I'm going to jump over to the second comment on page 3 and then we can go over the proposed responses. So AHI, this is the second comment, recommends the provision for non-sterile drugs in proposed CCR section 2091, subsection E, clarify that only FDA-approved animal and human drugs be used for non-sterile compounds when they offer the needed active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs. AHI asserts that while the requirement for sourcing bulk APIs from FDA-regulated facilities is a good step, it is no guarantee of quality or actual oversight by the FDA. AHI states that while the FDA inspects and registers manufacturing facilities, they do not approve APIs. Rather, the API manufacturing and control process is approved as part of the Federal Center for Veterinary Medicine's CVM animal drug product approval process. AHI asserts that being an FDA-registered facility does not mean the facility is approved to make the specific API purchased in bulk by compounders. AHI argues that the manufacturing process for a unique molecule is by definition unique, which is why the FDA has chemistry, manufacturing, and control requirements that every manufacturer must meet for every individual product it makes. In addition, AHI notes that the facility, whether domestic or foreign, must be physically inspected to ensure compliance for all products manufactured at that facility. Under the current system, AHI argues that even if one assumes a compounding pharmacy bought an API from an FDA-registered facility, that API could have been manufactured in a severely inadequate process lacking the necessary controls for quality, consistency, purity, and stability. AHI alleges that this thorough vetting by the CVM animal drug product approval process is lacking in drug substances used for compounded formulas sourced from FDA-registered manufacturing facilities and circumvents the agency's role of ensuring safe drug products marketed in the United States for the treatment of animals. Because of this gap, AHI argues there is simply no way for veterinarians to know the origin or quality of the API they might purchase and use in the preparation of non-sterile compounds to give to their patients. When these non-sterile compounds are used as office stock, AHI believes they should contain only substances that appear on the approved list of bulk substances proposed by FDA, but not yet adopted. So just in short, our two proposed responses kind of hit three areas. One, we are indicating that part of these recommendations have already been addressed in the modified text that was noticed in November. Secondly, with regard to referencing the draft list that is mentioned here, we indicate that we are unable to reference that type of list in regulations because it is just that it is a draft list at this point. And the third component to our response has to do with some of these recommendations being outside of the realm of the board, and we're recommending that AHI perhaps pursue these efforts at the federal level. So I'm just kind of quickly summarizing. I will let, if Tara wants to clarify anything or chime in, feel free to do so, Tara.
Justin, you did an excellent job presenting this portion. I'm available for any questions the members have, but I think the memo and Justin lay out the concerns raised by AHI as well as the appropriate board responses and why the board is not going to make any additional changes to the rulemaking package at this time.
So if there are no additional questions or comments or suggestions, we do have a motion before you for your consideration.
Thank you for preparing those responses. And although pharmacology was one of my least favorite subjects in veterinary school, the issues raised here are, of course, very important to ensure that the medications that go into our beloved vets is of the highest quality, and assurances are made for that. It almost reminds me of a story I heard this morning about the tuna that Subway uses is not real tuna. So they need to take some lessons from us and assure that the quality of their ingredients is as good as the quality of the drugs we use in our compounded drugs.
Wait, what is it then?
Oh, they said it's a mixture, a concoction of a variety of components or something. They didn't even say it was fish. It was crazy.
It said it's anything but tuna, is what it said.
So Subway should adopt our regulations. Any comments from board members or any motions to approve the proposed responses? Then, hearing none, I will make the motion to approve the proposed responses to the written comments with recommendations received during the 15-day public comment period and direct staff to incorporate the responses into the FSR when proceeding with the final rulemaking package.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other comments from the board? Questions? Moderator, please open it up to members of the public.
This is the moderator. I am opening the Q&A at the request of the board, members of the public. If you would like to make a comment, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. It's currently being displayed on your screen for your reference, and type "I would like to make a comment" in the Ask field and send it to all panelists. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature? I couldn't hear you, but I think you said yes.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any additional questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, please call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Yanes?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Does anyone need a break right now, or should we just carry on? If I don't hear anything, I will carry on. Okay, so moving on to the board president's report. Despite unsubstantiated claims from Dr. Nolan that the elections at our last board meeting were fraudulent, I started the Nunez-Bowler administration started on January 1st. And one thing that I started to do with Jessica is to have weekly calls on Mondays. So that has been very helpful I did it mostly to make sure that I was updated on all the fast-moving issues that were going on. But it's really evolved into like I consider it a little talk show of ours where we have a special guest each call, being mindful of all the restrictions that are upon us in regards to the Bean Casserole Act, not having a quorum or anything like that. But Dr. Nolan was on one of our calls. We were just talking about just continuation of certain issues that were before the board and so forth. And of course, my fabulous Vice President, Kathy Bowler, was on another call. Next week, we're going to have George Clooney on the call. That should be interesting. We'll see if he says, I'm just kidding. But that's been very helpful. One of the things that we accomplished during one of these calls was public member Alana Inez had raised concern about the COVID vaccinations for veterinarians and veterinary staff. There was a bit of confusion as far as how that all rolled out. And it started out with the California Department of Public Health initially providing guidelines for allocation of the COVID vaccines. And in those initial guidelines, the CDPH had classified veterinarians and veterinary staff in the phase 1 category, phase 1A category. And but they kind of left the final determination up to various counties, and most counties abided by that. And a lot of veterinarians and veterinary staff, according to what the state said, had started to get COVID vaccinations, or at least tried to get an appointment for COVID vaccinations. Then LA County had determined that veterinarians should be in category 1B. For some, it wasn't clear as why they made that determination. It was probably likely because it seems like we don't have enough vaccines. But we felt strongly about the issue, and we wrote a letter to the CDPH, and I'm pretty sure you all received a copy in the email form. One of Jessica's emails has it. Basically, restating the fact that that veterinarians and staff they should remain in the essential critical infrastructure workers to help state, local travel and industry partners as they work to protect communities while ensuring continuity of functions critical to public health and safety. And we also brought up the point that in regards to mental health, these are trying times, and a lot of people are relying on their pets to keep them sane rather than turning to drugs or alcohol or becoming an insurrectionist or becoming radicalized. And the letter definitely kept us in the 1A category. For the state, we still remain in the 1B category for LA County, but they have at least conceded that for those that did get the first vaccination, will be able to get their second vaccination if you're able to get an appointment for it. And having said all that, we've kind of been seeing that it's kind of hit and miss, even though according to LA County, we're still in 1B. A lot of veterinary staff are making appointments and getting that first vaccination or being turned away. It just kind of depends on which clinic you make your appointment with. But I do understand that there's just not enough vaccinations out there as we thought there would be. And I strongly believe that we are critical in any recovery efforts to keep our pets safe and healthy. There was also some mention about veterinarians being incorporated to help administering vaccinations. I don't know if Jessica has any more information on that. But I know that the president wants to to get more vaccinators to help out.
Can I just add, Mark, that first off, thank you so much, Jessica and Mark and the executive committee for sending the letter to the CDPH. I've seen multiple outbreaks at various veterinary clinics. It's ran through the clinic that I primarily contract with. Our primary vet has it right now, and the lead tech has it. They're very sick, and they're staying in a hotel to protect their families from catching it. The whole practice has shut down. And I knew this was coming. They tried to get the vaccines that first week that the county did have the veterinarians in phase 1A, and they had the appointment for the following week, and the county had already stopped and had downgraded them to 1B. So it really is just unfortunate that this is happening. But I would like to reiterate to anybody who's listening in the public that is a veterinarian or a vet tech that you can get a vaccine right now in phase 1A from Kaiser. Kaiser is honoring that. So please tell your friends, tell your contacts, tell your professional network. Kaiser is honoring the phase 1A in counties that are not honoring it. So please, just, it's been really difficult here in LA. It's been very hard to see my friends and colleagues get sick. And I just really would urge all of you to get your vaccine at Kaiser if you can. If you're not a member of Kaiser, it doesn't matter. You just call and make an appointment, and they will get you in. It takes 3 to 5 days for the nurse to call you back, but you will get an appointment if you are a veterinarian or a vet tech or support staff for a veterinarian. So I just wanted to get that out there.
Yeah, thank you. That's useful information. It certainly has impacted a lot of their hospitals. It's not a good time to get sick for people or pets, but we will survive. We'll get through this.
I wanted to add to Alana's comment, if I could, Dr. Nunez. I recently had to take my pet to the vet on a Sunday, and they were doing curbside service, and I was, it's minorly inconvenienced. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 2 hours, but I was watching some of the other pet owners coming, and they were crying and wiping their tears and then touching the carriers and handing them to the support staff who was coming out. And the RVTs and the unlicensed assistants really are the most vulnerable. And I had heard from some RVTs that in certain counties, they would go to the vaccination site and there was a sign saying veterinary staff will be turned away. So I really do thank you for that. And then I had a question. Dr. Nunez, did you say you're meeting with Jessica weekly? We don't pay her enough for that.
Yes.
So just so we're all aware of that.
I agree. We do not pay her enough. But we like each other a lot, so I hope she looks forward to it.
I do.
And the other thing it's been tough. It's been really hard on a lot of levels. Finally, Jessica and I attended on Friday, January 22nd, meeting of the California Board of Governors meeting. And it was a little bit later in the afternoon. Jessica gave a report and touched on every single issue that we're all dealing with. And it was pretty impressive. I was on the edge of my seat. Of course, I might have been the only one on the edge of my seat, but it was a good report. I was sad to hear the news that Dean Larimore is retiring as Dean of Western University. And Phil Nelson will still be with us at Western. And that's the end of my report. Any questions? If not, we can move on to Jennifer Laredo for the Rvt Report.
I'm sorry, we have to do public comment on every agenda item.
Okay. Moderator, please.
Thank you. This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type "I would like to make a comment" in the Ask field and send it to all panelists. Individual identified as Anita Levy Hudson would like to make a comment. Anita, I have.
question regarding the COVID vaccine administration for veterinary staff personnel. I'm in the Bay Area, sort of San Jose-ish, and I'm just hearing so many conflicted stories, as Jennifer mentioned. Do you know of a sort of contact person, or if somebody goes and they're not able to get a vaccine or they're not able to schedule it, are they supposed to sort of speak to the next person to appeal to them to say, oh, I am a medical healthcare worker? I'm just wondering how I can advise carpet members or just other coworkers how to proceed.
Can I answer that? So from what I understand, if you cannot get a vaccine right now from your county, then you just need to wait till phase 1B. But they will honor 1B, from what I've been told. So you just have to wait until, you just have to be very diligent about checking your county's public health website. You can get notifications from them. They have Facebook, they have Twitter. And in LA County, you literally just sign up on your phone. I signed my parents up to get their vaccine. They've both gotten it already. But most counties have set up the ability to just like make the appointment via your phone, but you have to fall into the right phase. So I would just continue to monitor daily your public health website. And when 1B phase comes up, which is from what in LA County, that will be early February, then you should be eligible. And like I said, you can go to Kaiser right now. I would go to any Kaiser and try and get an appointment right now.
I'll just want to add to that too. The governor's office recently announced their new app, My Turn, and you can find more information on his website, and it's gov.ca.gov. And it's an app that you guys can download to get notifications of when it is your turn to be vaccinated. So that's for veterinarians and for all our licensees and also the members of the public. Just so you're aware, that app is available. I believe right now it's only available to specific counties, I think LA and San Diego for their pilot, but they hope to launch it to everybody in February.
Yeah, I think that in regards to the question, even if you know that it's your turn and you go to one of these vaccine clinics and they still turn you away, I think the question was, who are you going to call at that point? And unfortunately, the reality is that it's not a well planned out process, and there's going to always be people at individual clinics that may be paying attention or may not be paying attention or not know what they're doing. Unfortunately, you just have to keep trying. I heard some people going up to Catalina to get the vaccination, but it's going to be challenging. But know that we can get it, but you may have to try other places. Kaiser is a good resource for that. Any other public comments?
No further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Rvt Report, Jennifer Laredo.
Okay, so as we heard at the MDC meeting on Wednesday, our PAVE for RVTs is completed. Yay, we get to check one thing off our list. So as Nancy Gritman from AAVSB had stated, we hope to get that rolled out sometime this year. So that's a huge accomplishment. So a huge thank you to the AAVSB and the collaboration. The AAVSB subcommittee, the PAVE RVT subcommittee, I was on it, but I can tell you the other members were so wonderful in all of the work they did. I missed one meeting, and when I came back, they had done so much in my absence. So some of the greatest technicians, because some of them from out of state were not technicians, some were doctors, but a lot of good work went on there. So great job to everybody on that. Another huge win, and thank you to Jessica and the staff, we finally got the Vtne pass rates by school. So I know that's being presented in one of our reports later today, so I don't want to steal too much thunder on that, but I do have a question that maybe Jessica or the staff can answer. I did see that we have, I think it's 6 schools that do fall below the national pass rate. They're in red on the report. So it does state in the report that we are required to inspect those schools, take some sort of action. Where do we go from here? How does that work as far as the process?
So I can answer that. When you look at, and this might be more for the examination report, but when you look at it, just because they fell under the national pass rate once, that doesn't trigger the board to do anything other than continuously monitor that. It's when it falls below twice. So when it falls below twice, it doesn't require the board to do an inspection or put them on probation, but it does, the board may do that. And so as explained in the examination memo, the board will have be able to decide to send a notice to them to put them on notice, and then the board can have a hearing with those schools during the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I will bring up some more during the report, but I did have some concerns about, like I said, 6 of the schools had fallen under for 2 consecutive years in a row. But that's been in the making for years. Before I was with this board, it's been really difficult to get that information and have it broken down. So thank you so much to all of the staff for that. Such a big deal. The next thing I have is, I had mentioned it in my last report, but the shelter medicine issue, although we are not focused on that right now, that is still an issue as far as access for shelters, not just in rural areas, but any area. And I think that will go along with access in general, what we had discussed yesterday after that presentation of access in lower income communities. So I think that's something that will advance with some collaboration, because I've said it before, the board just doesn't have the authority or the resources to fix these issues, but hopefully with some collaboration, we can make some progress on that. The next thing I have is, several years ago in my report, I had brought up the question that was posed asking if we had any California representatives on the CVTEA, which is the AVMA committee that focuses on standards of accreditation for veterinary technology programs. And we did not have any California representation, but it was very difficult finding anybody, because it's so difficult to find an RVT who can take so much time off every year. I know, just me personally, it's very difficult for me to set aside the 3 days, 4 times a year to attend, these meetings in addition to the subcommittees. So that was kind of a no-go. And I'm just catching up on my emails, and I did see that there are multiple positions on the CVTEA. So there was one, and I actually was notified by the AAVSB because of my position on one of the subcommittees. So there's one position representing boards, and then there's another position representing veterinary technicians, and another one representing the public. So I encourage any RVTs who have graduated from an AVMA approved program to go to the AVMA website and read more about that. But Cliff's Notes version, you have to be a NAVTA member in good standing, able to invest 12 to 16 days per year away from home. So there are site visits, and you would not be going to sites in California. You would be going to veterinary technology programs in other states 2 to 3 times a year, and attending the biannual committee meetings in the spring and the fall. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it, but it's a really great opportunity. And again, I know that a lot of the association members were wondering if we could get some California representation at that level. So that's a wonderful opportunity. Again, check the AVMA website. And I believe applications are being accepted until February 5th, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a few days to get that together. The next thing I have on my report is the issue of name badges and title protection. And I recently learned that that's more of a, Jessica gave me the correct term for it, but maybe a legislative issue, something that is not, again, another thing that the board doesn't really have the authority to enforce the way things are. So that's perhaps something that maybe an association could take the lead on. I'm not really sure, but I just wanted that not to fall off the report. We're not ignoring that. That's still something that's on there. The fee increase, we are still working on it. And I do want to clarify that I know I throw a lot of hissy fits over the fees. I don't at all think that I'm the only one who cares. I know that every board member, every staff member, and every MDC member cares about the issue as well. I think that's more expressing my displeasure at the system. But I do thank everybody who has been working on that to try and get those fees reduced. I really just feel that it's easy to forget how difficult things are when we're not in that situation. So again, I mentioned I had to take my cat to a vet on a Sunday, someplace I wasn't familiar with, curbside pickup. I didn't like that. And then having to go find compounded medication and prescription food. And did I mention the hospital shut down 2 days later because they had a COVID positive employee? So I wasn't even able to go back to that hospital to get what I needed. So I think we forget how difficult things are. And that got me to thinking as well. I'm very privileged in that I can, if I go to Walgreens and there's a line, I can leave and come back later. Some of these employees are very bound to their schedules. They don't have time to go outside of business hours. They really are the most vulnerable. I know we're all aware of that. I just want us to keep that in mind, that the veterinary support staff, the RVTs and the assistants, they are the most vulnerable. And then the last thing I have on my list is, again, just make sure that everybody's focusing on self-care. This is a crazy time in our world right now. And I know in my youth, I worked 3 jobs to support my horses, and I've still never been as busy as I am now. My workload has more than tripled since we have been virtual. Our meetings have increased, and it's very, very easy to just go on autopilot and not take care of yourself, not eat healthy. As Dr. Nunez had mentioned, maybe use other coping mechanisms that are not so healthy. I know personally, if it weren't for my pets, I would have gone crazy long ago. So just make sure that you are all focusing on self-care and taking care of yourselves. And that's all I have. Who has questions?
Kathy, you might be sad to know that the Wranglers have not had any dance practices since the pandemic started. So there went one of my coping mechanisms, but I do still have my pets. Jennifer, just a couple of quick questions. Has the number of committees you're serving on changed since the last meeting, or is it still somewhere, I think it was in the 30s?
It's still in the 30s. And believe me, when I saw the CVTEA position, I started clapping my hands up and down. I literally cannot take on one more thing. I'm trying to practice self-care and take it down a notch. My grandparents always told me I don't know how to sit still. But yeah.
Although you're well qualified to be on that committee, I'm glad that you said no.
Not so much.
And later on, you'll have to tell me how you have almost caught up on your emails. I'd like to know how you did that. And
delete.
The only question I had, are they still doing site visits during the pandemic for technology programs? Or even?
I actually don't know that they are. I haven't seen any on any of the advisory committee programs that I'm on. And I would assume that they would be more virtual, but this position is for July of 21. So maybe we're being hopeful that the world will open up again. But from what I understood, there were some members who have left the committee, which is what opened up these positions.
Okay. I don't know the answer to that, but I would assume that they're not doing them for RVT programs or veterinary schools. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. And I wanted to add another thing too, and I'm sure Dr. Nunez will agree. I really want to thank our staff, Jessica, for everything she does, all of the staff. Rob Stephanopoulos, if it weren't for his friendly text messages reminding me to check my emails, I probably wouldn't remember to get things done. And I know that Tara is, our attorney. She's just the best. She knows like everything. And I know how difficult it is. We complain about the problems and we don't appreciate the work that goes on behind the scenes. So I really want to thank our staff. We've had some really great strides for RVTs that we've made in recent years. And I really thank our staff for that. Thank you guys so much.
I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one that gets those gentle reminders from Rob. Any other board
I love those, Rob. Thank you for the text messages.
Any other
problem?
Any other questions from the board for Jennifer? Moderator, please open up for public comment.
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A feature. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. And this is the moderator, Nancy. I'm going to try to unmute your microphone. You are unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a lot better than typing. Okay. My comment was about the pass rate for the average pass rate for the school RVT schools. We apparently have the national pass rate, but this section 2065.7 section 2 says that the schools shall maintain a pass rate above 10% below the state average, not the national average. So either we need to get the state average or we need to change the regulation. That's my comment.
Nancy, I'm glad we were able to hear you this time.
Yes, it's a lot easier.
So those numbers that you were mentioning, Jennifer, that were below the pass rate, is that, said that they are for the board exam, or
This is.
I was going to ask about that when we got to that specific report,
okay.
But that's a great question that we can ask at that time, and I'm going to read the regulation that Nancy just mentioned.
Okay, and then also, then, are there any other public comments?
This is the moderator. No further requests have been submitted. Nancy, I'm going to ask you politely if you can please mute your microphone. I can't mute it from my end.
I can't either. I'll try to be quiet.
May I recommend exiting and coming back into the meeting just because there is some background noise coming from your microphone?
Sure, I'll try it.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Should I close the Q&A feature now, Dr. Nunez?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board or Jennifer? And then in order to help you read up on regulations and attend other committee hearings, we're going to take a bathroom break right now. Let's come back at 10:43.
Dr. Nunez.
Okay, the next item is item 16, National Association Involvement Reports, given by yours truly and Kathy Bowler, and I'll let Kathy start.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm hoping Martha, one of the parrots, will not speak in the background here, but so forgive me if she does. So for ICVA, and these reports are really brief, we just had our board meeting, not in the Florida Keys, but virtually last weekend. And I'm pleased to report that with ICVA, that staff, like our own staff, has been so resourceful, so ridiculously hardworking this last year in terms of helping thousands and thousands of very stressed out veterinary students, trying to deal with classwork, or, their own stresses that way, but application for the NAVLE and completing the NAVLE. And all the testing windows were extended. There were a lot of issues throughout 2020, like with everything else, with outbreaks and testing centers being closed. But interestingly enough, more students took the NAVLE during the fall and spring 2020 and fall 2020 testing windows in 2020 than they did in 2019. So we were able to accomplish a lot, which is wonderful. And they, I think one of the concerns of ICVA and other of the veterinary partners, AAVMC and all the rest, is both diversity and access in terms of the student population. And as far as ICVA was concerned, we were able, because of some staffing abilities as well as some testing access, to provide free assessment tests to students throughout the course of this, and thousands took advantage of that, which was really very helpful for them, hopefully. The 2021 testing window for the spring has been extended again. It's usually, I can't remember, it's 2 or 4 weeks in the spring. It's now going to be from March 1st through May 31st. And hopefully, and the application windows were also extended. So, sorry about that. What is, anyway, let me think here, what else? We just also completed our strategic plan for 2021. And one other interesting sideline that sort of dovetails with yesterday's conversation and shows that nationally, I think a lot of the veterinary community is also concerned with access to care, access, and diversity amongst the veterinary profession. And while it is very largely women, high majority of women graduates versus male graduates these days, it is still unfortunately very white. And we had at our board meeting last weekend, a 3-hour workshop on how we're a nonprofit board, a private nonprofit board, and therefore have other resources that we can work with. But how a board of a nonprofit or an international organization utilizes and incorporates diversity, inclusion, equity, privilege into its decision-making processes in order to accomplish the mission and vision statement. And it was quite an interesting dialogue, and we've got some action items that we as a board are going to try to do to help with testing for individuals and make sure it is more across the board accessible to for all demographics of students taking it. So that's really the ICVA world. Our next board meeting is in June, possibly in person, possibly virtual, depending on the situation. But like everything else, the COVID 2020 year has been extremely difficult for all the testing and assessment agencies, as well as obviously the colleges. And that's really all I have for ICVA. We are still working with our new assessment director. We have the highly skilled staff that were added that are assessment experts, very, very well known and respected, that are helping with looking at different modalities and different technological ways of testing skills like communication, some of the less tangible skills in future NAVLEs, so that these tests will be a little bit more, I guess, optimum than a standard multiple choice test. So that's really what I have for ICVA. If anyone has any questions.
And for the AAVSB member and program service think tank report.
Yeah.
I can cover that.
Okay, fine, Mark.
It's also another short report. Just if anyone was wondering what the purpose is, the programs and service think tank's overall responsibility is to review existing and proposed programs and services utilized by AAVSB member boards that are provided by both the AAVSB and the ICVA, and recommend improvements in the interest of public and animal protection. So it's just a committee that pretty much tries to keep everything relevant and current and address the needs of its members. We had our last meeting. It wasn't in the Bahamas. It was virtual. in October 27th, and they went over the strategic blueprint. I was impressed that they do this every year. I think we do ours once every 5 years, but they have they update their strategic blueprint every year, and I was impressed with that. Some of the programs that we were looking at, there's a veterinary technologist needs assessment program surveys. They do a lot of surveys just to assess the needs. They're talking a lot about making different levels, different tiers of RVTs, almost similar to the human profession, like the nurse practitioner levels and so forth. What to be involved with education and training for those options, and the need for those options, and the only thing I added to that was you also need to consider the financial to give them the pay that they deserve if you're going to be having different tiers like that, and added, and also if you're going to consider things like that, all the regulatory issues that would need to be involved with authorizing these different tiers to do different tasks, but that is not anywhere near implementation stage. It's just discussions that are being had. The issue of corporate ownership was talked about. Again, California has had that talk already, and so Kathy and I provided our insight onto what we experienced. Of course, updates on COVID distributions and how it's affecting our hospitals. I think Kathy had mentioned about the streamlining of the NAVLE eligibility application process, updated on the application programming interface, data transfers. That's going to get the Vtne scores available for us to review, and license verification programs, license and disciplinary information is going to be helpful when, especially when we're processing our applications for licensure. If there's been disciplinary actions taken in other states, be helpful. Our next meeting is coming up, and
February 11th.
yeah, and that's about it.
Mark, could I just add on the streamlining on the NAVLE? It's another way that these groups are seeking to lessen the barriers and do some cost savings, particularly for students. That we've discussed that before, and they're moving forward with that about not having students have to select a jurisdiction and pay for that selection at the time they take the NAVLE. They'll ultimately have to pay the fees when they register in whatever state they want to, but at least they don't have to pick the state 6-8 months before they graduate and are even sure where they're going to go. So that's moving forward. The AAVSB is working with the state boards and provincial boards to get various releases along those lines. And I know Jessica is working with the AAVSB on for California. That may require regulatory stuff. I'm not quite sure what it requires for us, but it will ultimately save the students a little bit of money and a little stress.
I actually had a question. Dr. Nunez, I don't know if my sound was cutting in and out, but I heard you say something about something similar to nurse practitioners. What was that part?
Let me pull it up. It was...
My biggest question, was that for technicians?
Yeah, let me pull it up here.
Yeah, it's different grades of technician. A thought. This is a thought.
Yep, again, it was a thought. I can't remember which state was talking about it.
Yeah, it was a very early stages of different gradations, like a master's and you'd have different levels of a veterinary RVT, basically. But
Yeah, because I know we're going to have the presentation, but I've heard from a lot of RVTGs, the veterinary technologists, that I mean, they're in the same position as an alternate route RVT or the one who never even took any classes and just did that one-time eligibility window to take the exam. So that's something I'd like to keep my eye on. If you could let me know what state that was, and I'll stalk them.
It was Idaho. It was from the great state of Idaho. And they were proposed job duties for various levels, parentheses, always under the supervision of the veterinary medical doctors. And they had levels 1 to 4. I'll just kind of jump up to level 4. At this point, this is vague. However, as with nurse practitioners, the goal could be for some level of diagnosing, treating, and prescribing, as is allowed with their cohorts in the human medical field in areas where there is a lack of availability of doctors, parentheses, large animal, in parentheses. This could be beneficial in the future.
Do you know if that's the only state that is broaching this subject of RVTs taking on more practitioner type duties?
It's the only state that has shared it with AABSB, but I don't know if there's others.
And I also think the RVTs that are being discussed here have to go through a larger curriculum. It's not, and so it would cost more to become a higher level RVT. The thought is they could earn more potentially as well, but there's there's a lot of ifs there. So
yeah, I always think cautiously about making comparisons between human medicine and veterinary medicine. It's impressive how many different people do different things in human hospitals, and it seems easy to be a human doctor because everyone else is making all the other decisions for you. You're just there to sign on. I think that's what I think veterinarians rule. But also, if it's a matter of economics as well, I cannot work without a support staff. I would love to have a very high qualified support staff that can do a lot of things so that we can offer more services to our clients, but they have to pay for all this, and with it's the client that's paying the bill, and it might not work economically, but where there's a will, there's a way. But it's being talked about.
Yeah, my mind instantly goes not in practice, but shelter medicine, because I'm just thinking of the access and all of those issues. So I definitely want to keep my eye on that. Thank you for mentioning it.
Any other? Well, there's also an agenda item in regards to changes to the bylaws of AABSP. If we have any comments on making changes to their bylaws, I don't.
Before we move on, we just need to get public comment on agenda item 16.
Oh, okay. I thought that was all right, but it's not. You're correct. Any other comments from the board on National Association involvement reports?
Dr. Nunez, where are you on your quest to become involved in the leadership of the AABSP?
Well, I was robbed the last time because they canceled the elections for 2020. We had 17 million votes for us, or 7, I don't know how many. I was robbed, but we're planning on storming the headquarters, and we'll see what happens. But in all seriousness, 2020 elections were canceled. There's 2021. I think it's a little bit vague on my eligibility because without a grace period granted by the governor, my term will officially be over in 2021. Like Governor Newsom, if you're listening, I am more than happy to help out and serve in any way possible. But I don't think that the AAVSB actually requires you to be actively serving on a board, but there might be like you should have been serving on a board within 5 years or something. We'll make that clear. Any other questions? Moderator, please open it up to the members of the public.
Thank you. This is the moderator. Members of the public, if you would like to make a comment, please click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of the WebEx screen and type "I would like to make a comment" and send it to all panelists. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Hearing none, moving on to agenda item 16B. Agenda item 17, which is discussion on possible action regarding their bylaws. I don't have any objections to the bylaws that were proposed. I'm not going to speak to Kathy, but I don't think she does either. I'm sure all of you have read a copy of the current bylaws or AAVSB from cover to cover. Does anyone have any? Or Kathy, would you like to add anything?
No, I don't. And actually, I think we have a bit of time on some of these things. If we were to suggest any bylaw, it's a little more in the weeds than individual boards, are concerned with in terms of their bylaws. They've had, this item is all sort of for information only of all their proposed activities that they're doing right now, I think, and it's useful for all of us to read. We do have our meeting in April, and I'm not sure if there was action to take, if we could take it then if we wanted to. Their next conference is next September in Colorado, if it's, hopefully. And that's when any of these things would be passed. So I don't really have any thoughts on this either.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that in this age of adaption, I'm proud of this is an example of just collaboration and working with other groups, a time of unity to get issues solved. And so we could really involve the AAVSB more than in the past. So it's a good thing, as Martha Stewart would say. Any comments or questions from the board members on that? Moderator, please open up for public comment.
This is the moderator. I am opening up the Q&A at the request of the board. Members of the public, you have the instructions on the screen. Click on the Q&A icon, type "I would like to make a comment" and send it to all panelists. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A? You're muted, Dr. Nunez.
If there's no further questions you can close the public comment section. And if there's no further questions from the board, we can move on to agenda item 18A. There's breaking news. It's a Fox News alert from Jessica. If you'd like to.
Hello, members. So there were no materials to send out because we just put this really as a placeholder. So if there were updates, I could be able to provide them to you. As of at 9:55. I did receive an email from the Senate BMP, and I'm just going to read it. I know the board members have it, but just read it for the public's sake. It is from Alyssa Silva, the consultant, a Senate committee on business professions and economic development. It says, hello, everyone. Hope you are doing well and staying safe. Thank you so much for your timely report and supplemental materials submission to the committees. The details and logistics for the upcoming Sunset Review oversight hearings are still pending. Given the ongoing concerns about COVID-19, it is likely that remote participation will be preferred, as was the case for the fall Sunset Review oversight hearings, in order to comply with social distancing and other public safety protocols in place. We'll be sure to make you aware of the dates and particulars as soon as we have the information. You will begin to receive draft staff background papers in the coming weeks as well. We are grateful for your attention to those and for reviewing the background papers to verify the information and statistics. Please do not hesitate to get in touch at any time if you would like to check in, or of course, if your board members have any questions or would like additional information. That's all the updates we have. The last I heard from Patrick Lay last week, there's rumblings about our hearings being set in February, but again, we still are not sure on when. So I'll continue to provide updates as they become available to you.
So Jessica, Kathy, and I will be camera ready whenever we're called. Dr. Nolan, you dodged the bullet. Should have been you. You dodged the bullet.
Yes, he was all ready to do it too.
So do you remember we actually did the mock Sunset Review, and then within 12 hours they canceled it? We were ready to go, locked and loaded.
It was the last time I think I saw you. And then they shut the building down 2 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have like mock senators and mock assembly?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, you know, I know Dr. Nunez and Ms. Bowler will handle it beautifully along with Jessica.
Again, it won't be my first time to the rodeo. I presented the last Sunset Review. It was a wild ride. Do we have to go? Do we have to have public comment or?
No, we can do public comment after we go through all of the reports, and then you take a public comment on the whole item.
Okay. So we have to start our petitioner hearings at 1 o'clock, and so we'll have a lunch break. I'm not sure, 12 or 12:30. We'll see how this goes, but let's start with the administration report, please.
Thank you, and I apologize to members. Tim Rada is actually dealing with a family emergency, so I'm going to be filling in for him. He's really the expert on all of this, so I'll do my best. But if there's anything that I'm not able to answer, I'm happy to take that back and respond as soon as possible to you guys. The first thing I want to just highlight is most of you, I think actually all of you, have worked with Liz Parker. Parker Smith. Liz has been with the board for over 15 years, and she has done such an amazing job for all of us. She's done a great job with the board members and making sure all of their documents are in place. And so we just really appreciate all of the service that she's provided to the board. I know that she will definitely be missed, and we just really want to say thank you to her service. The next thing we have is, and actually, Moderator, would you mind if I can share my screen so I can we can all be on the same page here? Thank you. 1 second. All right. So before I turn it over to Bikram, who is our DCA budget analyst, to go over the details of the budget and the fund condition, I just wanted to provide some updates to the budget letters that were introduced. As I think I reported at the last meeting, all of the state employees have to take a 10% budget or salary cut. In addition to that 10% salary cut, we are having to do a 5% budget reduction. So initially when the budget letter came out, we thought that the 5% budget reduction was to the entire budget, and we would have to come up with $331,000 of savings roughly. After further clarification from Department of Finance, they removed some areas and decided that it only had to come out of our operating and expenses budget line item, which reduced it from $330,000 roughly to $108,000. Then even after we posted this, we got additional clarification from Department of Finance, and they had removed several items in our budget that we really had no control over. And so that reduced that. The 5% really is just coming out of like a small portion of our budget. And so it reduced it down to, we had to come up with, instead of 108,000, we have to come up with, I believe it's around $53,000 of budget reduction. What I noted though in the memo is when you look at our line item for the entire budget, you look at the travel line item, and that has historically been pretty low as far as what we actually spend, but the amount budgeted for was over $211,000, was actually $211,000. So we've never come close to even meeting that. But what we have been doing is using any of the cost savings to kind of supplement any other expenses that we have. So they help provide for limited term staff out of our blanket, and other areas that we need, we've reallocated that savings. So we won't be able to do that for the $53,000 that we are going to do a permanent cost savings, our budget reduction, but I don't think it's going to impact us as much as long as we keep continuously monitoring and managing our budget as much as possible. The other thing I wanted to mention is there was another thing that we had to deal with. There was a budget letter regarding special fund loans to the general fund. And so we are having, because of the 10% salary cut that all of our employees are having, that money equated to roughly $321,000 in our special fund. We were initially hopeful that that would just stay in our fund and help support our fund, so we wouldn't have to, it would delay raising fees in the future a little bit. Unfortunately, though, we did receive notification that that is going to go into the general fund. And so the $321,000 is going to be, it was taken out of our fund this fiscal year. And there are parameters for when that money has to be paid back. It's either when the general fund no longer needs it, or when the board is in danger of becoming insolvent without it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bikram, and he's going to present the budget and the fund condition and the expenditure report. Bikram?
Hi, so this is Bikram Dhaliwal. I'm from the DCA Budget Office. Thanks for the introduction, Jessica. I'll go ahead and jump into the expenditure projections that you see here. So these are for fiscal month 5. So they reflect data that's through November of 2020. And ideally, we would, move on to fiscal month 6. I think that's coming up soon. So for the next meeting, we'll have fiscal month 7 or 8 for that. But for now, we'll just cover whatever the most recent data that we have. So this is fiscal month 5. I even put in the current year revised budget, which you could see kind of in the middle of the document. So that's the revised budget for 2020-21. And with that, it includes adjustments to personnel services, mostly retirement, salaries and wages, and so on. So with that being said, at the top, we have the personnel services. And as of now, just looking at fiscal month 5 data, there's pretty good news overall. I'm expecting close to 400,000 in reversions from personnel services. And I have been working with administration or admin manager, Timothy. And so he's kind of been helping me to forecast where some of the vacancies are going to be filled and exactly which month they're going to be filled. So I do believe that these are pretty accurate projections, just considering that I've factored in some certain start dates for the vacancies that are currently there right now. So for example, like let's say a position is getting filled in March or April or so on, I've actually factored in those potential costs that are going to come from those. So even with those being factored in, overall there are going to be reversions from personnel services. And like I mentioned, it's roughly 400,000 almost. So that's pretty good. That's going to allow the board to absorb costs in OE&E. And I know Jessica already touched on travel. and that's a pretty big category. In terms of OE&E, there's a $211,000 budget for that. And historically, just like Jessica mentioned, there have been significant reversions there, which helps cover some other areas. But other than that, there's also reversions in things like general expense, AG, and like as I mentioned already, personnel services is a big one. So with that being said, as I'm tracking all these different expenditures and OE&E and so on throughout the fiscal year, I'll be able to fine tune some of these line items. But as of now, just through fiscal month 5 data, I am projecting a roughly 10.6% reversion. And so that's a surplus, and it comes out to about 676,000. So that's pretty good as of now. But like I said, I'm going to continue tracking those vacancies, seeing where they actually get filled, and you know, all those different things and factors are going to have an impact on the reversions. But I think even last fiscal year, there were pretty significant reversions. So overall, I think the board is doing a great job in terms of cost savings. And as Jessica even mentioned, I don't want to get too much into it, but the 5% reduction drill that we're currently in the middle of with Department of Finance, that's something that we're targeting travel and state. But you know, we'll keep an eye on that as we move forward. So overall, the expenditure projections look pretty good, but fiscal month 5, as you guys all know, there's 12 months in the year, so we'll keep an eye out on how these numbers change as we get more data. I should have fiscal month 6 soon, and then for the next meeting in April, by then I should have fiscal month 8 or 9, so I think we'll have a much better picture, and much more accurate picture, I should say. But even this is pretty good. This is almost half the years of data. So overall, pretty good news, but we'll see as time goes on. And then moving forward, we have here the fund condition statement. This is the 2021-22 governor's budget. So it includes the actuals for 1920. 2019-20 closed in early October. I'm not sure if that was the case at the previous board meeting, but good news is that it's closed now. And so we have actuals in that 2019-20 column that you see kind of in the middle of the spreadsheet. And with that, we basically are determining that there's about 5.3 months in reserve for that year, and that takes into account what we anticipate the expenditures for the current year to be. So overall, it's kind of it's increasing gradually from 5.3 months in reserve to 5.6 and 5.7 with a slow taper off at 5.5 for 22-23. But as you guys know, a lot changes, a lot fluctuates throughout these fiscal years. So, you know, 5.7 could be higher in 21-22, it could be lower, but it just depends on how expenditures come in. And this is actually a scenario where we're taking full budget appropriation for 2021. Like you see that number in the expenditure section, 1111 program expenditures for 2021. That's 6,382, which is actually, you know, 6,382,000. That's the total budget appropriation, net budget appropriation, I should say, for Veterinary Medical Board for this fiscal year. And as I'm previously covered with the expenditure projections, we are anticipating around a 10% reversion. So generally, with reversions being considered, you don't expend to the actual net budget authority. So for the next board meeting, I will actually incorporate what we're anticipating the expenditures to come out to for the remainder of the fiscal year. And most likely that's going to bring good news in the sense that instead of projecting to full budget appropriation, we will probably factor in those savings and those reversions. So even though a 5.6 months in reserve, according to the governor's budget, is pretty good, that's just for display purposes. But in reality, for the next board meeting, like I mentioned, I think we will see those numbers even higher. So like maybe 6 months in reserve or something, for example. So because I do anticipate actual expenditures to be below 6 million at the end of the fiscal year. But we'll see, like I mentioned, with more data coming in every month, we start fine tuning those numbers. And kind of going back up to the revenues, I skipped that a little bit, but those are the workload revenue metrics that I worked on with the program and with Timothy back in, I think, October. So in looking at 2021 revenues and onward, we are taking into account those fee increases that were already implemented, I believe, last January. So this is now a full year of those emergency fee increases. So that's why you see that big uptick in revenue, and same thing with 21, 22 and onward. But I believe those are still going to go through regs and whatnot. But this is just based off that workload revenue drill, which is a part of the annual budget building process that takes place in October. And so with that being said, you see a big increase in revenue, which is good. And there is that $321,000 that you see coming out. That's a loan to the general fund, which the Department of Finance determined based off of the 10%, well, technically 9.23% employee compensation reduction, but roughly 10% just to make it even. And so that's the amount that Department of Finance determined based off their metrics that Veterinary Medical Board could afford. So as a bit of an emergency loan to the Department of Finance and the general fund specifically to cover costs and whatnot. And don't worry, this was not something specific to Veterinary Medical Board. It applied to quite a numerous amount of boards throughout DCA, just depending on what Department of Finance determined what a board could or which boards could afford it. So yeah, overall, this is the fund condition statement. It ties to the governor's budget display. And like I said, for the next board meeting, it will factor in most likely fiscal month 8 projections for both revenue and expenditures. So I think that will be a much more accurate display, but this is also pretty close, but this is just taking into account full budget authority. So, it might be a very worst, I don't want to use the case, I don't want to say worst case scenario, but this is assuming that actual expenditures are like 100% and no reversions. So, which usually isn't the case. But overall, this is what it looks like now. This includes all the BCPs and all the other adjustments that are part of the budget building process and the governor's budget, which came out earlier this month, I believe on January 8th. So yeah, this is just a snapshot of where we stand right now.
Okay. One thing I would say is when the general fund came knocking to take the loan, Jessica and our staff did see if there was any exemptions that we could qualify for so that the loan wouldn't happen, but we found none, and it is what it is. Just a quick question. The loan of 323, that doesn't seem to affect the fund balance because it's not technically out of our fund balance because it could potentially be put back in. Is that right? Because I see the fund balance actually went up, and I assume that because of increased revenue from fees. It didn't, even though there's a loan on that book, the fund balance doesn't reflect it.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point. And I think that's ultimately because of a big increase in the revenues that we're anticipating based off the workload revenue drill that was completed. And because you can see total revenues in 1920, they came out to $5,852,000. And for 2021 onward, we're anticipating $7,520,000 basically, but for 2021, $7,518,000. And that's a big increase there. And that's because we're factoring in a total year of fee increases and revenue. And then And even though at the same time, expenditures are also increasing, but even while expenditures are increasing, revenues are increasing at a pretty big rate as well. So it kind of offsets a little bit of that 321,000 general fund loan. But
the question is the fund balance down at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Is that with the loan taken out or?
Yes.
So, okay. So
yes, that includes everything.
So even though they've taken that 325, our fund balance went up.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
And then the other question I had is, does this include the budget change proposal that we would need to have all the our temporary positions made into full-time positions?
No, it does not.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you said that it does include it, but it doesn't. So, do you know what the numbers would look like if you added in that budget change proposal? Do you have that information, or no?
That's something that I know because there's a bit of a fine line in terms of what's confidential and what's not, and I know it kind of depends on where we're at in the fiscal year and what's already been approved and reviewed. So that's something that I can work out with, put together a scenario and then share with Jessica at some point, and then we can go from there. Because right now in front of me, I don't have a fund condition that has anticipated increases in expenditures based off of any sort of proposals. But that is something that we typically work on when it comes to, factoring in how costs are going to increase and what the effect on the fund condition is going to be, depending on what proposal we're talking about. So, yeah, that's something that I can work on with Jessica.
Yeah, because this report looks nice, and congratulations, but there's always something that we wish for.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to Dr. Nunez's point. So we can't put anything in the projections here in the budget until it's part of the governor's budget. So as you may recall, the 6 positions that we have that are limited term in enforcement, and we also requested a limited term manager. So in order to make those permanent, they were a limited term for 3 years. So to make those permanent, we have to do another budget change proposal to pursue. And so these numbers do not reflect making those positions permanent. So I know that we are going to need to make them permanent. So like Dr. Nunez had said, it looks good now, but it's definitely subject to change.
Exactly. Yep, that's a good point.
Can I ask a quick question? It's Kathy.
Yeah, of course.
I just want to confirm on the expenditure projection, the budget report, where we show 675,000 an unencumbered balance. Is it right to then presume that the state we are loaning 321,000 of that to the state? So our unencumbered balance is truly half of what that is, or?
So yeah, that's a good question. And the answer is no, it's not coming out of what you see here on the expenditure projections, because these expenditure projections, they take into account the actual budget appropriation that the board has for this fiscal year, which is $6,382,000. And that's a component of the entire fund, but the fund itself it's like a savings account. And then we have these different accounts within it. And I guess one way to look at it is like the budget authority, the budget appropriation is kind of like a checking account. And so this 321,000 that's being taken out, that's a separate transaction. That's a direct hit to the fund. And it has nothing to do with the actual budget appropriation, which the expenditure projections, that's all about budget appropriation.
Okay.
But the fund condition statement, it takes into account some of those other things, right? Like those direct assessments to the fund, which that 321,000 that's going to the general fund, that's a direct transfer out of the board's fund. So it won't have anything to do with what we're seeing in terms of these reversions.
Okay.
And then, sorry, Kathy, can I just jump in really quickly to provide further clarification for that? So even the 675,000, that's that number, even though it's not impacted in this budget, that reversion goes into the fund, right?
Yes.
And so that 321 has already come out this fiscal year. Any reversions happen at the start of next fiscal year. So if we put in 675 into the fund, it helps make up for that 321 that was coming out of it. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
Getting the timetable of recouping that 321 is what exactly? Obviously, when the state doesn't need it anymore, which I don't know when that'll be, or when we get close to going insolvent, they will give it back to us. So is it? I mean, when we had these loans to the state before, do we ever get the money back?
We do. I know during the last recession, this board didn't have enough money in its fund to support a general fund loan, but I can tell you from experience when I was at optometry, we did $1 million loan over to the general fund. It took several years to get it back, but we did eventually get it back.
Okay. One question I had on the personnel, the salary and wages, the net savings of 246 that's listed here. Is that because of the open positions that we just filled a lot, I know, or filled some of the enforcement positions, but is that largely due to the open positions that we've had, or?
So I do believe you look at personnel services and the total savings is 391. That's obviously really high. I don't think it's just vacancies. I think that is part of the 10% salary reductions because we're budgeted for the full amount, but the salary reductions come out, and so that equates to spending less than what we're budgeted for. But Bikram can confirm me if I'm wrong.
Sorry, my mic was muted. So yeah, the reason why I would say there's a large reversion coming from personnel services is because of those 6 limited term AGPAs that were granted at the start of the fiscal year, which definitely increased the budget authority or the budget appropriation for personnel services across the board, especially for salaries and wages and staff benefits, because those are the 2 specific line items that are impacted when you add positions. So that takes into account budget appropriation. Like when you put a BCP in and for new positions, it funds those positions starting for July. So it takes into account funding for 12 months, but it's not like realistically, it's pretty difficult to fill 6 positions like right away, right? So it takes time. So I think some of those savings also came just because, like, you know, for example, maybe 2-3 months went by and then, you know, you start filling those positions in and then, but you had the appropriation to fill them for the whole year. So that definitely helps. And then, as I mentioned earlier and whatnot, those vacancies are getting filled. So it is kind of tapping into those reversions a little bit, but this projection actually does account for even more vacancies being filled. I have it formulated in a way where I'm adding in the monthly salaries that would be accounted for. Like, let's say you fill X position in March and it has a $4,000 salary or something. I actually accounted for those. So I think that's one big reason why overall we're seeing large reversions in personnel services.
Okay, thanks. And I just have one quick question. I know it's necessary and we're not the only board suffering from it, but I feel bad for the staff to have to take the 10% salary reduction. I know we don't have any control over it, but I know how hard they have been working and continue to work, particularly in this remote COVID environment. I'm wondering, is it hopeful that at the May revise there would be reconsideration of this, or was there a time certain on this 10% salary reduction?
I think it was mentioned here in the attachment, and I guess no one really knows 100% right now. But just considering the fact that when Governor Newsom did release his budget earlier this month, it was with pretty good news in the sense that revenues were a lot higher than anticipated. I think the government assumed the worst case scenario in terms of the budget deficit, but 2020 proved to be a much better year for revenues than originally anticipated from last year's May revise. So that's why they implemented that 9.23% employee compensation reductions, or 10%, you could say, which for maximum would have been applied for 2 years. But I think now we'll see, we'll keep an eye out on that, but I think it's going to end up being eliminated starting July. So, which is good news, I guess, for someone who works for the state. But, you know, we'll see. And then that will increase the budget appropriation for personnel services. Because right now, personnel services took a hit in terms of the budget appropriation for it because of those 10% reductions.
Is there anything else for the administration report?
We just go over some of the accomplishments that we made according to the strategic plan in here. So I won't go too much into detail because I know we're running short on time, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me.
I did have a quick question, might have been for Bikram actually, but since it took us a while to hire those extra positions, the limited term GPAs, is there a way we can keep them on the extra, you know, until we spend that money, or will they just be terminated at the end of the fiscal year?
So I can jump in, and Bikram, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the authority for the positions and then the funding for the positions are different. And the authority for the positions was for the three years limited term. So they might not jive because we might not have spent the money for the time that it took us to hire those individuals, but we lose the authority for those positions unless we proceed with a budget change proposal to make them permanent.
Okay. Thank you.
So we are going to try to end at 12 and have an hour lunch break. Please note for the next reports, the strategic plan objective that is on there for each point that's in the report. I'm very proud of all these staff reports, and I hate that we have to rush through them at every meeting, but it doesn't mean that we're any less proud of your work. So for the next ones, I'm going to assume that you've all read their reports. For the staff members, if there's anything super urgent you'd like to highlight or anything new, you are free to do so. But then we're just going to ask for any questions that the board has for the reports. Having said that, 18C, examination.
Mark, that's where the RVT college exams are. And I thought there was going to be more discussion there. I think there should be.
This is Tara. I'm going to present this item on Tim's behalf. So what I would like to point out in this report, these are the examination pass rate statistics for the CSBE, NAVLE, and Vtne. Board staff compiled RVT candidate pass rates on the Vtne for fiscal years 2018 through 2020. Pursuant to California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Section 2065.8, subsection A2, the board may place a school or degree program on probation for a period of time not to exceed 2 years if, for a period of 2 years, the approved schools or degree program's yearly average pass rate for the first-time candidates who have taken the registration exam falls below 10 percentage points of the state average pass rate for first-time candidates who have taken the RVT exam during the same time period. Board staff has identified one RVT program whose board approval may be placed on probation: San Joaquin Valley College. their first-time test takers for the years 2018 and 2019 fell below 10 percentage points of the state average pass rate. You can see on page 2 of the memo, the state Vtne first-time test taker pass rate in 2018 was 67%, and in 2019 it was 68%. On page 3 of the memo, the graph shows that the pass rate for first-time test takers from San Joaquin Valley College was 37% in 2018 and 16% in 2019, which was more than 10 percentage points below the state average. Please consider whether you wish to place San Joaquin Valley College on probation pursuant to CCR section 2065.8 subsection A2 for falling below the required state average pass rate percentage. If you want to place this RVT program on probation, you will need to move and approve this action.
And let us know what probation involves for the board.
So there is a due process involved with this probation. If you move to place them on probation today, before that probation is effective, CCR section 2065.8.2 requires the board to provide notice of the probation and an opportunity for the program to be heard by the board. The board should consider when the college may appear before the board, perhaps at the board's next meeting in April. But today, we need you to consider a motion to place them on probation. Then a notice of probation would go out to the program, and then a meeting or an opportunity for the program to come to the board and discuss their probation would occur potentially in April or July.
Can I ask a question about this school? Is this a junior college, or is it one of those, is it like Platt College, one of the, what do they call them, technical schools? Vocational schools?
That I don't have the answer to. I don't know if Jennifer is more familiar with the types of schools that they are. But if not, then we can look into it a little further and get back to you.
I'm actually Googling it right now, and I'm not finding a quick answer. So
I'm also curious how much they're charging students for their program too to become an RVT.
Well, perhaps you could ask that question if you place them on probation. They could report to you the details of their particular program.
Okay.
But today it looks like they are in violation of our regulations.
Yeah, I say.
I think we should move forward with it then.
I agree.
I'll make a motion that we put them on probation.
Jennifer, would you like to second the motion? I'll give you the opportunity. If not, then I'll second it.
I think you should second, Dr. Nunez.
I second it. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion from the board? Since this is a motion, open up the public comment, please.
And did the numbers drop before the pandemic, correct? Their numbers?
That's correct.
Okay.
And moderator, I don't know if you're speaking, but you might be muted. Moderator? Moderator, we can't hear you to open up instructions for public comment.
Ground control, can you hear us?
Good morning. This is the co-moderator. We're having some technical difficulties, and I've just been handed the moderator role. Can you hold for just a moment? I'll be right back.
Thank you.
In the meantime, I did want to make note, and I agree. I agree with this action, but it's interesting to note that the number of students that were taking the test first time was 41. The first year of this chart in 18-19, and it dropped 50% down to 19. So it's, I think, worthy to note that students may have been figuring this out as well. I don't know, but just a thought.
Yeah, it's the actions that we're taking, I guess it sounds very similar to the accusations. If they have the opportunity to come on the board, address this.
The following year, though, it was COVID, though. So I don't know if that was it also.
Total number of students taking the test actually went up from 823 to 832. So it wasn't a decrease across the board when it comes to total candidates taking the test, which I thought was interesting. Some of the other schools dropped, but quite a few also, gained to make that balance out.
To save time.
The co-moderator again. We're having a few technical difficulties. Would you still like me to open up for public comment, or would you like me to wait a little while until the conversation stops?
If you're
Tara, this is Tara. I have some more information to present to the board pending the co-moderator technical difficulties. Perhaps I can go ahead and talk about this.
Tara, please have the floor, and we'll continue with public comment when you're finished. There is one person that's waiting to make a public comment. We will go ahead and bring that person in a little bit. So, Tara, you now have the floor.
Okay, so the next section in the memo shows that there are RVT programs that, in addition to San Joaquin Valley College, are subject to board inspection for inspection, not probation, falling below 10 percentage points of the state average pass rate for first-time candidates required under CCR section 2065.7 subsection B2. There's 5 of them in addition to San Joaquin Valley College. This section differs from the probation requirement in that the percentage points are based on all of the program's test takers that year, not just the program's first-time test takers. Since the board has discretion to inspect the programs and no formal board disciplinary action is contemplated with an inspection, no motion by the board is necessary to inspect those programs. We just got through the whole memo. Do you have any questions about probation versus inspection, or do you want to have any formal motion on inspecting all 6 programs? You don't need to, but you can.
I think it would be challenging to do an inspection right now, but I would be in favor of letting them know that they fall below this requirement and could be subject to inspections. But I don't think we can do inspections right now.
I agree with Dr. Nunez. Not only do I not think inspections are a great idea right now, I know a lot of the RVT programs are not even able to offer classes they normally would because there are hands-on AVMA required tasks they have to teach, and that's not something that can be done virtually. So I don't know if this is something we can revisit, just kind of seeing what's happening with opening up and returning to campus. Not that I don't think we should inspect or place on probation, but I think we might even have a hard time reaching the directors of these programs because they're not physically on campus.
Is it possible instead of inspection, because I agree, I don't think we should do an inspection right now because it's not safe for anybody, but just to send them a letter indicating that put them on notice that, hey, you're dropping and we've noticed and we plan to inspect once it's safe, or something along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I can work on with our team to send them a letter notifying them that they're not in compliance and they're now subject to the inspections.
Yeah, I think that's what I said originally, but maybe in light of what Jennifer said, maybe add has the current condition, or just ask about how the current condition has affected their ability to run their programs. Please provide.
But if you look, like some of these dropped in 18-19. It looks like for the Carrington College, they've all dropped in pre-COVID, which is concerning because this was pre-COVID.
Right.
So something's wrong.
I definitely do appreciate the input from our Rvt board member on that point. So I'd like to include that in consideration.
Would we be able to send letters to all of these programs, kind of putting them on notice?
Sure. So in the letter, what we can do for the ones that are now subject to inspections, we can notify them of the fact. We can also ask them to respond as to why that they believe that they are under, and go from there. We can provide that information at the next meeting if they responded.
Good.
Do we need a motion for just to set on that inspection part?
No, I think we just providing that direction to us, we'll be able to move forward with that. We just need to go back to public comment for the motion to put that college on probation.
Then let's open up public comment now for Rvt.
This is the moderator. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. I will be opening up. Oh, it's actually open. Individual identified as Anita Levy Hudson. I'm going to unmute your microphone at this moment.
Wonderful, thank you. I just wanted to chime in to tell you guys, I believe that San Joaquin River Delta College is a community college. Last I knew, it's been a long time since I had paid any attention to that school, but at least several years ago, it was a junior college, and they, had a host of other programs as well, not like a vocational school.
Thank you.
No further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
I seem to remember, I think we might have almost tried to have a board meeting at that college, but maybe not. It's been motioned and seconded to place San Joaquin College on probation for falling under below 10% of the state average for 2 consecutive years tested. Any further questions for the board? Hearing none, please call for the vote.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Ms. Prado?
Yes.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Yanes?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
Yes.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Licensing.
So members, before we go into questions, the main thing I just wanted to highlight that's not in your memo is I'd like to get some direction from the board when it comes to printing and posting licenses. So printing is a big cost, and you can see I think it's like $45,000 for cost for printing, and it's a separate cost for mailing out all of the licenses. What I would like to do is something similar that I did with optometry. The first thing that we were able to implement is we stopped printing the paper initial licenses. We still gave them the option to purchase the certificate that goes on their wall. But instead of printing and mailing out, we changed to a feature that we could publish. It's called publish to licensing. So as soon as we issue the license, we can publish it to the licensee so they can see in their dashboard the license that has been issued. And so they're the only ones who can access it. They can go to it at any time and print it out. The other thing that I want to explore with DCA more in depth, and I've had a couple conversations with OIS and with Kim Kirkmeyer, the director, about going completely paperless when it comes to renewals. What I'd like to proceed with is to utilize the information that's on the license lookup page through DCA, because that information is the most updated information. And so the whole requirement to post your licenses is for the consumer, so they know that that person is a licensee of the board. But that is only as good as that point in time that license was renewed and then printed and mailed out. So by the time it actually gets to someone and posted, it might already been outdated. And so what I'm wanting to look at exploring with DCA is to utilize the license search page and to be able for the public and for the licensees to print out their license and post it, and then have a QR code on there that would allow, if you have a license posted, it has a QR code that takes them right to that licensee's profile. They'll be able to see right at that time if there's been any kind of action against that licensee, and they'll be able to make sure that the license is current at any time that they're obtaining services. So it's a pretty big undertaking. I just wanted to kind of feel you guys out and see if that's something that you would want me to pursue.
Jessica, I think that's a good idea. I know Sacramento County, my own business license was emailed, and I print it and post it. So it's pretty commonly done, it seems like right now, and it sounds like it would save money and be more accessible, especially with the QR code.
I think it would. I think that's a cool idea, because my initial thought was, well, if I was really good at programs, I could just print out a fake license, but the QR code would make sure it's valid. So I like it.
Yeah, and I can just say that that's been a concern that's been raised in the past as far as being able to have the licensees being able to print it out. There's concerns about manipulating the document. But I think something to keep in mind is we can't, those who are going to break the law, they're going to break the law. But I think with our abilities to do inspectors, with that QR code, I think that we're still providing the consumers with the necessary information.
Okay, any further comments on that specific issue or anything else in the licensing report?
I have questions on the report, and I know Tim's not here, but Jessica, you can probably answer, I guess. One question I had, excuse me, I don't think there's anything we could do, but I know there's been issues, particularly during the COVID situation. On the fingerprint issue, is there any potential DCA type waivers? I know the fingerprint issue, we're behind the game anyway on that, but I know it's also hard for people, and has been this last year, for renewals, et cetera, to get the fingerprint stuff straightened out. And I wondered if there was consideration. I think we talked about this, and maybe that because of we can't do anything about it, but I just want to ask.
Yeah, we did talk about this, and this is something that has been raised to DCA. There are no waivers for fingerprint requirements, and I don't anticipate any waivers coming. What I can say is that we've drastically increased our communication to the licensees who still need to get fingerprinted. So right now, they're getting, if they are eligible for renewal, they'll get a monthly email letting them know that they still do not have their fingerprints, and to make sure to do that prior to renewing. On the renewal notice that they get, which is sent out 90 days before renewal, it lets them know that they still do not have fingerprints and that their license will be held without fingerprints. Another thing that we just initiated too is a notice that we're sending out in the morning for those who just submitted payment in Breeze but did not have fingerprints. Sorry, excuse me. Because what we found is that because the system will still allow them to pay, a lot of people are thinking that their license is renewed, but it actually is not renewed because they don't have that fingerprint requirement. So I just drafted a template letter for our licensing team to use, and Tara has approved So, and what that'll look like is our licensing team will every morning run a report of all of those who submitted payments but are missing fingerprints. We'll be notifying them that their renewal is held. So we're doing our best to get the word out there and help them as much as possible that this is a requirement that they need to fulfill.
Okay, thanks. And then I just had a couple of general questions. I wondered, do you think that the reduction in licensees, premises, university, and RVT, et cetera, this year is a lot to do with COVID related? Or, I mean, it seems like those reductions are larger than we've seen in the past. And I wondered if it's not a big discussion point, but I just wonder what you guys thought about that.
You know, I don't know. What I can do, though, is I can take a closer look at it and bring that back to the board in April.
Okay. And then last, I just had a question on the printouts from Breeze. When we're looking at, because again, part of our goal here is to get licenses completed and processed for those that are accredited, you know, appropriately accredited, as soon as possible. And so I want to question, does it say, when it means average online cycle time in days, does that mean from start to finish? Like a license application and then a finalized license?
That's correct. So you'll see a number of the transactions, and the reason they're broken out by this way is really to show you just each transaction that we have. And so that goes back to our comments about the 9 transactions that can be reduced down to 2. So that's why you have them broken up so much. So a lot of these are for, the reason it's taking so long is because they've applied but have not yet met the requirements. So because they're allowed to apply before they graduate. So we have to wait for that. They can apply and then they have to take their exam. So that's a lot of the reasons why it's taking so long. But when we look at final license applications, you can see when it goes to average cycle times in days, it's taking an average of 17 days. That's from the time that we receive the application for the final license to the time that we issue it. And so I believe the strategic plan objective was 4 weeks. You can see that we are actually doing even better than what the board had requested, because the 4-week timeline was from the time you have a complete application to the time we issue the license. So we're actually doing a lot better than we even put in our strategic plan.
Great, got it. Okay, thank you. That was one of my big questions, and I assume a lot is you're streamlining your process, but also the online Breeze I mean, that's got to be helping a lot too. There's still a couple that are outliers, like reciprocity and things like that are taking longer, but they probably are more complicated to begin with.
They are, and I just want to let you guys know too that we are still working through the data cleanup phase as well. And so the licensing team is really looking at the oldest applications and trying to figure out if they are truly pending, because we're finding that a lot of them are not pending because maybe the applicant had put in one application and then submitted another application. And so that application might have been issued, but this one over here is still pending. So we're still working through that data cleanup. And then the numbers might improve as soon as we're confident that all the data is correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions on licensing? Agenda item ETE enforcement. Anything urgent that Robert wants to tell us, or any questions for Robert?
Is Rob going to do an overview or?
Well, in the interest of time, no, unless there's something really urgent you'd like to share with us or something not on the report.
Oh, am I on? Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is just that we have our 6 limited term positions filled. That's the biggest, I think, update because we've been waiting, for that. And I think since I started with the board, that was the big thing that I noticed right away is that, we were drowning in complaints. It was getting worse. We finally have those positions filled. I think we have some really, really solid picks. We have 2 that started going on 2 months ago, and they've already been sending me case recommendation route slip, which is great. So they've just hit the ground running. We've been having some very regular meetings to go over everyone's caseloads. We have 2 other individuals who started a little bit over a week ago. And then we also have the remaining 2, I guess, who are internal VMB staff members from licensing who will be switching over as soon as their positions are filled and they can get them, back trained. So that's, I think, the biggest piece. There's, with our backlog, we have several thousand complaints backlogged, and the hope is to get them trained ASAP. But I'm cautiously optimistic right now about everything. I think once we get them trained, and then obviously we get that limited term manager filled, because now there's 13 people under me. And I want to make sure that I'm not the bottleneck, whether it's actual recommendations for cases or personnel issues. I think typically it's 3 to 5 analysts is normally what a manager handles. And now obviously there's quite a few more. So we want to get that filled. And then obviously we have another OT for probation, which, that would be part of Ginger's report next. But I think that'll be another big piece to it. So I think at this time it's pretty exciting. Things are starting to come together for enforcement. And I think that we're, knock on wood, we're kind of moving in the right direction and we're on the way up.
We just have to maintain this current staff level.
We do.
Lose anybody. Because it sounds like, that's been, since I've been on the board, one of the biggest issues, and it's through no fault of anyone's, it's the systems, it's the number of staff turnovers and whatnot, and the raw number of complaints that we get because we have such a large number of practitioners. But these backlog of pending cases is just really unfortunate given, it's not fair to the practitioner. It's definitely not fair to the public.
No.
And every complaint has to be thoroughly and completely investigated and fairly investigated. So that's one of the biggest things that I always worry about it for this board, because it's our mandate really for public protection. So
right.
We are making progress. God, but
yeah. And I think I hear from, especially with the new year, it's kind of reawakened a lot of those aging complaints. So I am getting some, pretty upset phone calls from complainants about the time it takes. And I would like to think that they're maybe a bit disarmed, because I'm not going force on force when they're making those complaints. I completely agree. Their complaint is important. We're going to fully investigate it. It's just, it takes time. And now that we have some resources in place, like I said, I am optimistic about getting those handled in a more timely fashion. So, and that'll be further down the road because, we have to get to that point first. So.
Do you have any thoughts on an increase in complaints from frustrated clients having to deal with curbside service, or any more complaints as a result of just veterinarians having to practice differently because of the pandemic?
I don't think there's been anything too noticeable when it comes to that specific type of allegation. We have definitely had an increase in complaints just dealing with the whole COVID situation. Some of them are coming down to just non-jurisdictional, but yeah, there are some where they are alleging that something was not done properly that is within our jurisdiction. But nothing I would say that's really out of the ordinary to where intake would say, hey, we're getting a whole bunch of complaints, on this particular topic. So, it'd be one of those things, I guess, when we compare it to other things where it's minor and absorbable, I guess, to where it's kind of in the mix and it's reasonable. It's nothing that's a major outlier.
Rob, right now, I remember you gave an astounding number a few meetings ago where it was like 400 complaints per staff person or whatever that they were managing. What is it given if you spread out the 3,000 or so plus the current incoming ones, given your staff right now, it's still what, 200 or something?
It's about 300.
Yeah.
It's about 300. Yeah. So, we're still, above where it should be, especially based on where I came from and what my understanding is. And even when I talked to Karen Denver, our DAG liaison, about the complexity of our complaints, She freely admits, they represent a whole bunch of boards, and they say that ours are, typically the most complex complaints. And the majority of them are going to require an expert opinion. So there's going to be a lot involved in every investigation. And obviously my prior board, it was a small minority that actually needed an expert opinion. The majority were very compliance related. And they were just things that we could handle just on the desk level, so to speak. So, yeah, it's still a huge amount of complaints per analyst. But this is definitely one step in the right direction.
I just want to quickly add to that, and to Kathy's point, one of the common questions we got throughout the BCP process was why we weren't requesting more, because when you look at the data, it doesn't actually, it's not going to address the cycle time to do complaints. It's really just a stopgap to stop the bleeding with the backlog. Because as we close the oldest cases and we get more cases in, but we requested the 6 because that's all the fund could support. And so we freely admit that the 6 is still not sufficient for this size of enforcement program. So we will need to pursue additional staff in enforcement. But what we wanted to know first is collect data on what we're able to do with the existing staff, including the 6, and then we can reassess to see how many more staff we'll need to really get the caseload down to manageable levels.
Yeah. That was all I had. That was as far as the major updates. That was the biggie that I'm really excited about.
Well, that's great, Rob. Keep them. Keep those staff.
I will do my best.
Are we waiting on me?
We can move on to probation. If our main probation monitor can come on.
I'm trying to start the video, sir.
So again, if there's something that you would like to really highlight on your report.
Oh, it's good to see everybody. You have my report. It's normally just my statistics. I have 100 complaints now, and I have 27 on one person. I have the next one down is about 9 on one, and then 8. So I'm trying to concentrate on folks with clusters of complaints and older ones. Right now I'm only working on about 20 actively. I'm really excited to get OT. I think that's gonna help me a lot. If you have any questions.
When you say complaints, is that non-compliance with probation?
No, sir, those are complaints generally from the public or other professionals, just like a, right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ginger, this is Kathy. I know we said we requested the OT, and within the new budget parameters, we can still get this person. Is that correct?
It's my understanding. I think they've even closed receiving applications, so I'm really close to getting an OT.
And yeah, Kathy, just to let you know, because of the savings that we were able to recognize this fiscal year, we're able to pay for them out of the budget this fiscal year, which is why we were able to get them. We're still going to pursue with a budget change proposal to get the authority and the funding for that position.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's good work for finding the savings.
Questions?
Any additional questions? Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, sir.
Next is hospital inspections. If Patty Rodriguez could make herself known. There you are.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so you have all had a chance to take a look at the inspection report. We continue to transition to not ending with just the inspection, but if there are violations, and we're moving forward with additional action, whether that be administrative or disciplinary action. So the analysts are in a kind of a transition period where they're trying to learn the enforcement side of it, and so that's where we're at right now, and they're making some good progress. But again, everyone has a different learning curve, so we're working through all of that, but we hope to actually start getting some of these cases going and moving those forward. And the other exciting thing that came up last month was a meeting with OIS on this possible mobile inspection app for our inspectors. So if, it's still very early with that issue, but if it's something that's possible, keeping my fingers crossed, that would just be really be something great for our inspectors to equip them with these tools that are just going to make their jobs easier, and in turn ours as well on our side. So those are really the highlights that I had, but if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, that mobile app that you had talked about at your last report, I think that was going to be really helpful. You not only have to do the inspections, you have to do the next part in bringing them back into compliance. And the mobile app will definitely help that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the backlog that is always the devil.
Right.
So I will share your hopes and your prayers.
I have a question. So how are we doing the complaint-driven inspections right now during COVID? Are we requesting records virtually? Are we still sending inspectors out to hospitals? What's our process right now?
So we're still sending inspectors out and just making sure that they're complying with wearing PPE and all of that, and maintaining that social distance whenever possible. But no, they're still physically performing inspections.
I have a quick question on the Acela. It sounds like that's very early stages still, Patty, but did OIS give you kind of a possible timeline for deployment, like within the year 2021? Or did they?
I wasn't actually at the meeting, and maybe Jessica was present, and I'm not sure if they discussed the timeline.
So they said it's still a little too early to discuss timeline because they need to really understand more of the parameters of everything that we're looking to get. So this is a follow-on from back when I first started with the board, and I went out on an inspection and realized how long it takes to do an inspection for our inspectors and how manual it is, and also for our staff. And so I had requested OIS come and do a ride-along, the heads of OIS, to see how manual it is and how much time it actually takes. And so this is their response to that by reaching out to Acela, and this mobile app is already being used by Bureau of Cannabis Control through their inspection mobile app, so we know that it works. And so one of my biggest things to OIS was a cost is a huge factor for us. Bureau of Cannabis Control has a lot more money than we do. And so that was one of my biggest concerns, is I want to make sure that we can streamline this process, but we can't bankrupt the board. And so through that conversation, OIS suggested that we reach out to other programs who also have a large inspection program. That's the Barber Cosmo has one, and Dental Board. And so they were involved on this, really just a demo of what is possible. And so now OIS is working with Acela to set more parameters in place, and then we can develop a better timeline of when that'll happen. So we'll have more information hopefully by the April meeting.
Thanks. I just had one more quick question, because I'm a big fan of these inspections, particularly the random ones, as a tool for public protection. Complaint driven are critical, and I know due to budget constraints and personnel constraints, not to mention COVID, we kind of were reduced to doing complaint driven really only, and even that's much more limited in this COVID environment. But presuming things go back to normal relatively soon in the world of, vaccines and COVID, do we expect that we can get back to random inspections anytime soon, given the number of inspectors we have and our budget situation? Because I think really that finds so many issues that will end up as complaints at the end, or harm to animals that we can get at the very beginning with random premises inspections.
So I'll just jump in. We do anticipate being able to go back to random. As far as when that'll be, I'm not sure. We have done a few other random inspections just as a follow-on to some other inspections that we have done, and maybe it was a few years old, so we've gone out and done another random inspection. So those are occurring depending on the severity of the violations that we found. We're also doing the probation inspections. But one thing that Patty and I will pay a close eye on is the being able to start the random inspections, but making sure that we have the funding to see those inspections through the entire time. Because what was happening in the past with the random inspections is we would send them out, give them a list of people to inspect, but then halfway through the fiscal year, Patty's team was told to stop doing it because we couldn't pay for it. And so what our goal is to pay a little closer attention and maybe even give inspections a budget line item itself to help track it, because we don't want to send them out, say go, and then not be able to afford it. So it's something that our goal is to start doing more random inspections. We just have to monitor it closely.
Any other questions for Patty? All right, thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
And on outreach, I know we don't have a TikTok page yet. Do you have anything to add for outreach? Jessica?
No, I would really encourage the board, though. There's links to the updates that have been provided. I want to thank Jennifer Laredo for her input on the homepage. But I also really encourage you guys to look at the public actions page that we added and the average processing times page. We added a lot more information for transparency to give all of our applicants and licensees a true picture of how long it's taking us to process applications. So that's all I have for now.
Any questions from the board on outreach?
I think it's really good and very clean. And Jennifer and the staff did a great job.
I have a lot of really cute ideas for TikTok, but we can talk later.
Well, the trotters could help with that. It is a dancing thing.
Exactly. So we'll open it up to members of the public for any comments on any of the executive management reports, please.
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A at the request of the board. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And we're almost at the end here. I wanted to give you an hour, but you have 30 minutes. Agenda item 19, future agenda items and next meeting dates. Looks like our next meeting is in April.
I actually have an agenda item. Can I jump in? I think we need to do interviews and possible appointment for some openings on the MDC committee. So we have 3 positions that are ending in June. I think the DVMs are eligible for reappointment, if I'm not mistaken, but the RVT has termed out. So if their last meeting is April, that means for July, they're either on grace periods. And there was some discrepancy. I was told there is no grace period for MDC members, and then I was told that there is not, that there is. So I think in April, we could do the interviews and possible appointments so that for July, we would be ready to go with either choosing a new member or reappointing the members.
And hopefully we will still be in existence in April, as we'll have done sunset review by then. Any other comments? Open up to public members, please.
This is the moderator. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, the instructions are on your screen. Again, just click on the Q&A icon and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. No requests?
Okay, please close.
Thank you.
And we will be in recess for a 30-minute lunch break and be back at 1 o'clock, please.
This is the moderator. I'm going to temporarily turn off the video function while we're out at recess.